and dear viewers around the globe. So today, once again, we are going to address the persecution that has once again come upon us, upon Kailasa in Bolivia. And we are going to be specifically addressing the media, the Hindu-phobic, anti-indigenous media and who have been spreading blatant lies about Kailasa, about Swamiji, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Parameshwara around the globe, blatant lies. And these about blatant lies that the Hindu-phobic, anti-indigenous media channels have been propagating is completely against the right to self-determination of Kailasa, and not just for Kailasa, but for all the indigenous nations around the globe. Understand, Kailasa is a Hindu nation and an indigenous Hindu nation. And we are here to support all the indigenous nations around the globe who have been denied their rights. They have been denied their rights to self-determination and the right to preserve their culture and tradition.
Now, right now, we have been seeing last 2-3 days about what level the persecution has been happening, and we are also receiving a lot of support from the Hindus around the world. And we would really like to thank all of you for coming together. But it's time for us to really, really stand together and fight this war. Now, what is happening? What is the latest live updates from on the ground? What is going on with the sovereign order of Kailasa's monks? And what is actually happening? Why is this persecution happening? And who are the people that are behind this persecution? And why is this being targeted, not just on Kailasa, but on all the indigenous nations? We are going to be addressing many of these today. And as we are talking to you, we are also noticing that there are many malicious, false allegations that are being slammed upon Kailasa and the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. Utter, baseless lies are being propagated by many of the anti-indigenous racist media channels. So today we are going to be addressing each of these false allegations and stating the facts clear. During this, if any of you have any questions, please take a moment and you can post it here in the comments.
The other thing that we are also looking at, especially over the last 2 days, we have all been witnessing the live that is going on. In fact, various of these media channels, the so-called the pro-indigenous media channels, we are going to be exposing every one of them today who actually are using the garb. And these are the people, the purveyors of the colonial fan fiction, what they have been doing. Today's term is going to be an exposing of all of these and presenting to every one of you, all our viewers, every one of you who are watching us live, what exactly is going on, what exactly is the truth, and how this anti-indigenous media, anti-indigenous racist, Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mesic media is conveniently trying to gaslight and attacking, persecuting the local indigenous communities which are there in Bolivia and Kailasa also at the same time. That is exactly what we are going to be doing at today. We are going to be looking at the accusations that are placed and we are going to look at the truth behind them.
So one of the main accusations that we see throughout all these racist media is that they are consistently labeling Kailasa as a fictitious state, as an imaginary state, as Kailasa doesn't exist. So let's look at the facts. Let's look at the legalities, the facts of how these media channels are wrong. So if we look at the very basic international
Fictitious. How can they claim something? No, it's a curious label given for a civilization that's older than most of the nations. But then Columbus once called the Americas as imaginary too. This seems like history is just repeating itself. Kailasa is a real sovereign nation, and we have the juridical statehood under the international law. See, for a nation, there are four things that are needed. Let us understand this logically. This is for everyone, all the viewers that are watching here with us as well. The diplomatic recognition under international law is not contingent on universal acceptance. The 1933 Montevideo Convention explicitly defines statehood as requiring four criteria. First being a permanent population, second, a sovereign territory, third, a functional government, and fourth, capacity to enter into relations with other states. Kailasa has all these four criteria. Kailasa fulfills all these four with a permanent population, and we have multiple sovereign territories and autonomous lands, and we have clear functional government based on the Hindu constitutions as per the Vedas and Agamas, and we have the jurisprudence, the Hindu jurisprudence in Kailasa. And we also have multiple diplomatic relations and bilateral treaties with so many nations, including many of the sovereign indigenous nations as well. So it's really, it doesn't make any sense that many of these media channels are even using this terminology, fictitious. This is directly violating our very fundamental right to exist, because when you call it fictitious, you're denying our very existence.
And see, there's another law that regulates this, and that is there's another article in the Montevideo Convention on the rights of and duties of the states, and it says that I'm going to quote the article number 3. It states that the political existence of the state is independent of recognition by other states, emphasizing the inherent rights of states to self-governance, territorial integrity, and political independence. Further, Article 13 of the 1948 Charter of the Organization of the American States elucidates the independent exercise of these rights within the framework of international law. And it states that the political existence of the state is independent of recognition of other states. Even before being recognized, the state has the right to defend its integrity and independence.
Adding in over here, I just wanted to ask the so-called media houses who are there, or rather, should I say, purveyors of colonial fan fiction, because you know what? Your recent articles are not just a journalistic misstep, but they are a full-on assault on the truth, the indigenous rights, and the basic decency. You have cloaked yourself as the champions of marginalized while stomping on the very principles that you guys claim to uphold. You know what? The irony is thicker than your editorial bias. Here, you are the people who are arguing that indigenous communities should not have autonomy to choose their own diplomatic partners, and trying to claim that Kailasa is fictitious. Self determination is where we have the indigenous nations have autonomy to do what they feel as right and to uphold their integrity. When you just go on telling that, oh, Kailasa is a fictitious nation not recognized internationally, who crowned you as the gatekeeper of sovereignty? The UN itself, in its charter, tells very clearly that it does not recognize states, it admits members. Taiwan, Kosovo, Palestine. You've heard any of them? They all exist without a UN gold star. Kailasa has it all. We have the permanent population, we have the defined territory, a functioning government, and diplomatic nations worldwide. And as mentioned earlier, we are rooted in the ancient Hindu tradition with an unbroken succession tracking all the way back to these Vedic and Agamic kingdoms that are there. Sorry if that's too complex for your word count. But as per the international norms, as per the Montevideo Convention on the Rights and Duties of State, let's lay it out. We meet every single criteria. This isn't about recognition, it's about your attempt to delegitimize all the indigenous rights. But we are still standing and we are not going to bend down or back off just because you're trying to delegitimize us.
And would this media organization dare to label any of the other states, other nation as fictitious? For example, we have the Tibetan government in exile since 1959. We have the Portugal or the Genoa that were actually occupied during the 18th century and also re-established after the Vienna Congress of 1815. We also have Poland, Ethiopia, Czechoslovakia, Albania, Austria. We have the Sovereign Order of Malta, who doesn't even have land today, but they have diplomatic relations with more than 100 states around the globe. And we also had the Ukrainian government that was in exile. We had the Royal Lao government that was also in exile. But why is it that only when it comes to Kailasa, only when it comes to indigenous nations, these media channels think they have the right to deny us of our self-determination, to deny us of our rights, to self-governance?
Denial is directly putting a question mark on all the international laws. Because as per the international laws, we follow everything. We are recognized legally as per the international laws. And who else needs to recognize us? We have so the three unbroken lineages. Swamiji is the inheritor of three unbroken lineages. And Swamiji is the king of these three kingdoms and 17 more sovereign states. So who else needs to acknowledge us or recognize us? We have the Kailasa juridical statement. In fact, United Nations has published our juridical statement so many times. It is this blatant accusations that these racist media channels are trying to put on us just to deny the existence of indigenous nations. They don't want the indigenous nations to be empowered. That is the main thing that they're afraid of. Because first time the indigenous nations are getting an international voice, a global recognition.
And if these indigenous nations are being the focus of target by these anti-indigenous media, the anti-indigenous mafia that is there, the thing that we need to look at here is to look at and respond at these anti-indigenous media groups and at their cheap shot of publishing defamatory hit pieces on every one of us. And these guys call it as reporting. That's not reporting. That's predicated smear with a deadline. You cannot have it both ways, where one side you call Kailasa as fictitious, and on the other side, you call that Kailasa has entered into very real agreements in the next. That cannot happen. This or that. Make up your mind. Hypocrisy is not both ways. Either you call fictitious when you're calling Kailasa as fictitious, then where is the question of entering into agreements with indigenous? But you want to claim that Kailasa entered into very real agreements and trying to exploit the indigenous. It's very blatant, it's very evident that the media, the anti-indigenous media, the mafia that all you guys are watching and what every one of you are looking at is just evident, blatantly lying, trying to utilize this entire opportunity to exploit and get their viewership high. It is as straightforward as that. If you just look back, if you actually strip down about the various lies that they are giving, the very clear truth comes up. These fellows go strut around as the great defender of the indigenous right. But the articles drip with paternalism. Sorry, indigenous guys, you guys don't get to decide who you work with because we will handle that. This is exactly the statement that all these anti-indigenous media are making, where one side they try to show that they are defenders of indigenous communities, but on other side they dictate who the indigenous traditions, indigenous communities, and indigenous nations have their relationship with, or with whom they can enter into relationship with.
And not only that, these media channels, they've completely ignored these international laws on which Kailasa and actually all these indigenous ancient nations are grounded on. For example, the doctrine of continuity, the sovereign rights. There's so many laws, international laws that on which Kailasa has legitimacy to be a state as any other state. And these media channels, what right do they have? Actually, they've completely violated their own ethics. They've completely ignored what they are supposed to be. They're supposed to be looking at both sides of the stories. They are supposed to be doing investigation. They are supposed to be giving the right information to the public, but they do not care about any of this. All they want is spread lies about indigenous communities because they feel they're scared about the power of these indigenous communities. So completely disregarding on purpose these international laws and with complete hypocrisy, just attacking left and right Kailasa and the indigenous communities and trying to show that Kailasa is against indigenous communities.
And on the other side, adding to this same thing that we are looking at, if we look at journalism, right? Journalism is where it has standard ethics, it has certain infrastructure, certain guidelines based on which it is supposed to go through. But if we look at the failures of journalism that is by these anti-indigenous media, we can present over 101 facts. Take it whether it's the truth or accuracy is completely gone to dumps because these guys have conveniently forgotten to mention Kailasa's diplomatic relations with multiple nations and the fact that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was exonerated by the US courts after baseless charges. Facts don't bend to your narratives, all you indigenous media. Same way, as per the indigenous and the information ethics, the journalism ethics, independence is one of the very important components. The anti indigenous, anti Hindu bias is so blatant that it might as well be a co author. Now, when we look at who pulls these strings, it should be colonial nostalgia or corporate cash. These anti indigenous media have got nothing to do, have literally got nothing to do with truth or with accuracy or presenting the facts in any way. It is a very well clear disinformation campaign that is explicitly used to delegitimize the indigenous nations and to gaslight the indigenous nations who are there in Bolivia of their own rights and their own self-determination, the very powers that are vested in them through the Bolivian constitution.
This whole false accusation is just a cook-up made specifically to silence and make sure that the indigenous communities are gaslighted and make sure that their powers are stripped off. This is the main agenda of these anti-indigenous racist media channels. That is the reason why, as soon as the indigenous communities are getting the benefits, are being really empowered, they're experiencing so much of transformation, they're experiencing so much of services, they're experiencing the real empowerment. And these racist media channels do not want that to continue because they know that many of their vested interests will not be fulfilled if the indigenous people are empowered. That is the main reason why they're trying to stop us using all different means. Now it is up to us, all the viewers, right now, as watching us. What do you think? What do you think as the right steps that you can take right now? Because we want justice. Hindus need justice. Hindus' lives matter. The indigenous lives matter. And we need to stand strong. What do you think are the steps that you can take? And what is your opinion or take on what these racist media channels are telling? How do you want to respond to it? I request all of you to take a moment and go to the comment section and post it here in the comment section.
and to all the other viewers who are watching us live from all over the world, and to all the members of Parliament of Kailasa, all the well-wishers of Kailasa, all the citizens of Kailasa, once again, we want to hear each and every one of your opinion on how systematically, in a very perfectly systematic way, this anti-indigenous media has been putting in the entire garb of pro-indigenous, but actually working towards exploiting the indigenous nations and the indigenous people out there. Starting with the first question that we just answered about claiming Kailasa as a fictitious country, but very conveniently hiding the information about how Kailasa derives its rights from the ancient traditions, unbroken lineage, and at the same time, how Kailasa has received recognition from the various international norms and the various international rights that are bestowed to Kailasa due to its unbroken lineage. And at the same time, trying to have a mockery and trying to delegitimize the indigenous people and the indigenous nation by telling, oh, they don't know all of these things. You guys have tricked them. So you're trying to delegitimize and trying to show that the indigenous people are fools. That's exactly what the anti-indigenous media has been doing. This is not just an attack on Kailasa. I want all the viewers who are watching us to understand, and all our brothers and sisters of the indigenous nation in Bolivia and all over the world, this is not an attack on Kailasa, and do not back off. If you back off, if any of us back off, the anti-indigenous media is only going to take more and more advantage of it and exploit us even more. Do not back off. Stand for what is your right. We will win because the truth is on our side. Just by gaslighting, the truth cannot be hidden. Let's stand strong. Let's all voice out our opinions, and the victory is ours.
And these anti-indigenous racist media, they are also propagating the lies that Kailasa has engaged in illegal transactions, that the agreements that Kailasa has signed with these indigenous nations are illegal, and that we are doing illegal transactions for financial gains. Now that is rich. We didn't buy anything. We are doing everything as per the local laws, as per international laws. And these were conservation partnership.
And these are not land grabs. Indigenous communities retain full sovereignty. We provide resources, support. Contrast that with the corporate sharks circling their territories. Bet they're your real buddies. Because our agreements align with the Bolivian law and the ILO Convention 169, which mandates respect for indigenous land rights. You would know that if you dug on your own past headlines. This is not profiteering. What we are doing is preservation. And what is your excuse for twisting it? Here you are answerable to us. And let us all the viewers, we need to raise these questions to these racist media channels.
Yes, sorry for the technical glitch. What I want to share here for every one of you is that these agreements do not threaten the Bolivian sovereignty in any way. In fact, they uphold it by honoring the constitutional rights that the indigenous people have, which is self-determination. The rights that all of these media houses seem to be very eager in dismissing in service of their anti-indigenous agenda, and they seek to limit the indigenous autonomy in the international relations. When very clearly the indigenous rights are mentioned and are given in various articles across the entire Bolivian constitution, wherein that these guys are trying to come up and show that Kailasa is land grabbing. No. If we were interested in the land grabbing, do you think that we are going to be entering into so many agreements that is directly in the direct accordance with the Bolivian law? No. Anti-Hindu, anti-indigenous media houses, let's name it out, whether it is Abasqua, whether it is El Mundo, whether it's Opinion, Infobe, Bruhula, all of these media houses which are there try to claim their pro-indigenous stance, but at the same time show how blatantly they are against the indigenous sovereignty, the indigenous rights, and the indigenous autonomy.
And let's be clear about it. This isn't an attack on the treaty itself, but it is an attack on the fundamental rights guaranteed to indigenous nations under the Bolivian constitution. The treaty is legally valid because Bolivian's constitution explicitly uphold the right to self-determination for the indigenous nations. And this is a powerful declaration of unity and a collective commitment to exercise their inherent rights. But now, these anti-indigenous lobbies like Awasca, El Mundo, Opinion, Infobe, Brujula, and so on, they are shamelessly attempting to strip these nations, these indigenous nations, of their hard-won constitutional rights, a right they have already been robbed of for many, many generations. And after enduring so many generations of systematic injustice and exploitation, they are once again being targeted to deny them of their ancestral and hereditary rights.
Absolutely. And not just that, I want to also reiterate on a very important point. This claim that the anti-indigenous racist medias are making, it's grossly mischaracterizing the very nature of our agreements. See, Kailasa's agreements with this indigenous communities such as Bore, Kai Baba, or Eseja are environmental leases focused on conservation and sustainability. These are not territorial takeovers. We have never and we will never ever violate the sovereignty of any nation, including Bolivia or Ecuador. And this is explicitly reflected in our agreements, which is included clearly. The crucial clause that we need to say here is where we have clearly stated that the transfer of payment shall be effectuated upon the completion of the following legal requirements. And we've also clearly stated how the ratification of the treaty by the government of Bolivia, only then all these are applicable. So we are completely in alignment with the Bolivian laws and Bolivian legislations, and we are completely in accordance to the law. So it is these press journals that need to answer us, why are they spreading such twisted lies? Did you do your fact check before you start spreading those lies? I think El Mundo, you need to answer here as to why, what is the truth versus what you have presented is completely the opposite.
Similarly, at the same time, Kailasa has never stated, and the truth is, Kailasa never even sought to purchase, quote unquote, or own, quote unquote, indigenous lands. Let's be very clear about here. Kailasa did not seek to purchase or own the indigenous lands as you falsely claim in your articles. What we have entered into is lease agreements that are in collaborative conservation partnerships. Please understand, these are conservatory partnerships and are very clear and explicitly respect the indigenous ownership and their autonomy. Be very clear. And even if you actually look at those articles and those treaties, the agreements that you falsely claim that you have received from various sources, and how you try to show that you guys are doing some pro-indigenous stuff, even if you just opened your eyes and looked at all of that, you would have understood very clearly that the agreement is for supporting of environmental protection, for sustainable management, for the preservation of indigenous knowledge systems, humanitarian aid, development assistance, cultural exchange, promotion of indigenous rights. Where in that article, where in the agreement have we spoken about owning? Never. Where in the article has it been mentioned about purchasing? Never. These are not transactions. You guys, you false fake media, anti-indigenous media, Hinduphobic and Hindu misic media, you try to clearly and convolute it by calling this as transactions. But no, these are not transactions. These are partnerships that benefit the indigenous communities while preserving their autonomy and land rights. Because you will lose your power if they start voicing out for what their rights are. You have been deliberately covering the entire truth up the way that you want and putting it out to the public. But be very clear, historically, when we look at it, unlike the extractive industries such as the mining or the agriculture, Kailasa's approach has only been to support the indigenous communities and their own development, their own vision, and helping them preserve their cultural and environmental heritage. I challenge all the fake medias, the anti indigenous medias who are there. Get us one reference where Kailasa has tried to take over land, has exploited land, has converted the indigenous. You will find no reports, no facts about anything other than just anti indigenous media who is trying to exploit the indigenous around the world.
Actually, this is very clearly proven by the very narratives that these media channels are carrying itself. Let's see. Actually, this is a very technical thing that we can very clearly observe the pattern, how the indigenous nations were persecuted historically. You will see how these aggressors, the racist mental aggressors who want to eliminate the indigenous communities, they try to brainwash those people who look like the indigenous people, but they are not the indigenous people. So they start brainwashing them, westernizing them, and use them to exploit the indigenous communities. This is how historically they have exploited and destroyed many of the indigenous nations. Now you can see this played out very clearly. We are seeing so many false, blatant accusations that these media, racist media channels are spreading. Do you see even one indigenous person actually coming and talking? No. The indigenous people about whom they claim as if they're protecting, as if they are trying to defend, not a single one of them are even being called to express what is their opinion about Kailasa, because these people know, these racists know that if they make even one of the indigenous members speak up, they know clearly that they are only going to support Kailasa because they've been benefited by Kailasa. The kind of projects that have been happening there, whether it is the food programs that are being conducted every day, daily free food service that is being served, or the yoga classes that are being conducted, the mental health empowerment that is being done, and the empowerment that is being given to them to voice out their opinions in international platforms. This is what these racist mental media channels are trying to somehow silence.
And one of the accusations that they're also putting on Kailasa is that Kailasa is exploiting the green funds and the climate finance. I mean, let's look at the truth, which is a very inconvenient truth for these anti-indigenous media, is that Kailasa also is an indigenous nation, and Hindus also are indigenous people. In fact, we Hindus as indigenous nations people, we have faced the longest and cruelest genocide and ethnocide in history. But despite this, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, he has revived Kailasa once again. And Kailasa doesn't just talk about environmental stewardship like these anti-indigenous lobbies will be doing. Kailasa lives it. It upholds the earth-centric values and it elevates the consciousness, not just as ideas, but which are integral to Hinduism itself. Whether it is the clean air initiatives that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has initiated, to the sustainable agriculture, to carbon footprint reduction, to zero waste initiatives. And we even have many of Kailasa's humanitarian agencies that span 196 countries. We are relentlessly working towards a safe, clean, and sustainable environment. Unlike those who are preaching without doing anything, without practice, Kailasa's spiritual leadership and green initiatives embody the principles and of responsible democracy, of environmental justice, and enlightened being, a living.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm seeing a lot of comments also coming in. I'm seeing Abhay Chatre, a viewer on YouTube. He has posted, we need transparent journalism, 24 hours giving truth. If such channels come up without any advertisement, it will take some time, but will certainly be watched by more and more people slowly. Actually, Abhay Chatterjee, I just wanted to tell you something. Right now, even now, see, we are voicing of the truth, but this is where we need all of your support. We need to amplify our voices. This truth needs to reach out to more people. We are telling the truth, but someone needs to help reach this out. Unfortunately, all the persecution, see, understand the current situation. The indigenous people, especially Hindus, we have faced 2000 years of persecution. And we are also the victims of double Holocaust, double killing, where you, first of all, you were persecuted, you are victims of Holocaust, and now you're being denied that the very Holocaust even happened. Unfortunately, we all are victims of this double killing. That is the reason why right now, see which Hindus are here. How many Hindus are here voicing out for this? We need to take this up right now. Take this up. Share this with all your relatives, all your friends. Don't bother whether they know Swamiji, they don't know Swamiji. Just go ahead, share. Voice out the truth. It is not just the activism of all the malicious people, negative people. No, it is also the inactivism of the good people. If good people become active, automatically the other demons will get silenced. We need our voices louder. For that, we need you. We need each one of you to come and join us here.
There's a very important thing where when we, being the people who know what the truth is, when we become silent, unfortunately, that is a fact today with the common Hindu, the mass Hindus out there. We have been persecuted to the extent that we feel discredited. We don't even feel like coming up and speaking. We feel, why unnecessarily enter into all this? Somebody is doing, let them do, good for them. But we don't understand that this in itself is actually a colonial mindset that has been put and drilled into our bone marrow by the colonizers and by the Mughal invasions that we for centuries, for years and years together. So it is time that we break out of these chains that are there. In beautiful reference that is there, where, for example, when a rope is burned, the rope, even after it is burnt, just the outer frame of the rope is there, but it does not hold the integrity. It does not have the strength. But what happens is the people who are tied, for example, an animal, if a bull is actually tied with a rope and the rope is burnt, the bull will still think that the rope is still there as is. It won't understand that the strength is gone. We are in the very same clutches now. We as Hindus might have lost the so-called persecution or the external attacks on us compared to what happened during the Mughal invasion or during the colonizing. But mentally, we are still in that very same mode. So unless we decide to break out of this mode and we so what is our rights, actively spread what is the truth, it is never going to come out. So once again, Abhaya and all the other well-wishers for posting your comments. The one request that I have is let us all stand together in this persecution against the indigenous communities and the indigenous people.
And there's a comment from Vince of York also that is saying, who is saying, I'm sharing to my Western friends. Yes, thank you so much, Vince of York. It is very, very important that this persecution of indigenous people reaches out to all people globally, not just to the indigenous people, not just to Hindus. It is very important, and we highly encourage everybody here on this platform to please share with everybody you know, and share to all the groups, the social media groups. Please do that, because why should we keep remaining silent? See, the reason we are getting persecuted so much is because Hindus have kept silent for generations and generations. We've started becoming okay with the persecution that we are facing, be it in our day-to-day life. See, the persecution doesn't have to be, you getting illegally detained. If you look very closely in your day-to-day life, can you wear a bindi when you go to work? No, you will be judged. You will not be able to wear a bindi. So it is extremely important that we reclaim our culture. There's nothing wrong in our culture. We Hindus, we started believing that there's something wrong in our religion, in our culture, because that is what has been ingrained in us by colonizers, by invaders. We've suffered generations and generations of torture, absolute torture. But now is the time, now when the avatar is on planet Earth, now is the time to reclaim back your identity. So please reach out even to Westerners, not just to Hindus. It is very important even for Westerners to know what we Hindus, what indigenous people have been going through, because nobody talks about it. We know about the Hindu Holocaust. The entire world knows about the Hindu Holocaust. But how many knows about the Hindu Holocaust? Not even Hindus know about it. So what are you going to do about it to take responsibility for it?
Actually, just one fact I wanted to highlight. This happened a few years back when you see, as Hindus, we have been subject to relentless persecution. Continuously attacks are happening. You can just see, because Swamiji started Kailasa in 2003, from that time onwards, Swamiji has been facing attack continuously. Now it's been more than 22 years, we are still facing the same attacks. Why are they attacking us so much? Once when one of the uh, media, anti-Hindu media had published an abusive article, someone asked, why are you publishing like this on Hindus? How come you don't take on any other religion? And that person, that journalist, mockingly asked, if I come and I'm publishing like this, I'm publishing like this for the last 10 years. Who can do anything to me? But if I go and publish anything about the other religions, if I even abuse one word of theirs, that's it. Tomorrow my office will not be there; it will be destroyed. No, this is a real thing that happened. This is what is happening right now. That is why, because we Hindus are not standing up, we are not voicing out and not standing together. That is also one of the important reasons why continuously attacks are happening.
And for us to understand, putting this in perspective, it is not that we are asking every one of you to go fight, to every one of you to encourage violence. No, that is not what we are doing. But in the name of non-violence, we as Hindus promote and just sit with a non-caring attitude that this is not my problem. It's gone about something else. Why do I need to bother about it? And this is what empowers these anti-indigenous media to voice their ideas, their opinions, to gaslight the indigenous nations around the world. Please be very clear. What we are looking at here is not just an attack, but on the indigenous people in Bolivia and across the entire world. These false news media, anti-indigenous media, whether it's El Mundo, whether it's Eldebar, and the other people, try to say, oh, Kailasa tried illegitimate thousands of years of contract for their financial gain. 1,000 years. Doesn't it sound a little crazy? That's because we are working to save the planet. And saving the planet is not a short term gig or a short term sidekick project for somebody. These sustainability commitments are not scams. They are fully compliant with the Bolivian law and they are subject to the approvals of the local indigenous. Go and check the Article 403 of the Bolivian Constitution. It protects the indigenous rights, it protects the indigenous integrity to their territory, and our deals honor that to the very letter. You are not mad about legality. You are just mad that we are thinking bigger than your quarter profits that you get. Tell me, El Mundo, what is your long term plan for the earth? Nothing but just smear campaigns, right? That is what you've gone in mind. What, by entering into these thousands of years of commitment, we are actively committing ourselves to protecting the nature. And I have another question, a follow up question to this one. Who are you guys to ask? Are you indigenous? You know you're not indigenous. Are you the authorities to deal with it? No, you're not. Who are you guys? Who are you to interfere with the authority, with the rights that are vested in the indigenous? You guys are supposedly more intelligent than them. You guys know more than who they are. Well, you know what? Historically, this is what the so called civilized folks have thought and have destroyed everyone. Please be very clear. Neither you are an authority on what you're trying to claim your foot on, nor do you have any interest in actually protecting the environment. I want to make it very clear here that the indigenous people have their own rights as it is enshrined in the Bolivian constitution, and their rights are respected, and you are expected to respect the rights that they are vested with. Same way, Kailasa is very clear about its commitment to protection of the environment, unlike you, who is only interested in exploitation of the indigenous. Let's get the facts straight here.
And one thing, El Mundo, you're saying that Kailasa pushed foreign religion on indigenous traditions. Are you kidding me? Foreign religion? We are not shoving anything down anyone's throat. Kailasa stands for religious freedom, for freedom of belief. Kailasa itself being persecuted, not being able to observe its full religious freedom. And indigenous Bolivians have their own spiritual mojo, cosmic harmony, nature worship, and we are all about it. Kailasa, once again, is an indigenous nation, and we worship Mother Earth, we worship nature. Suggesting that they can't handle a diplomatic chat without losing their soul, that's your colonial arrogance that's speaking out. The Bolivian Constitution, Article 4, clearly guarantees religious liberty, and we are walking that walk. You don't even know about the Bolivian Constitution, it seems, being a media in Bolivia. And unlike you, we don't treat indigenous people like children who need saving from themselves.
And this is so ridiculous to hear. Who are these colonialists to come and dictate us, the indigenous people, about our religion? And see the audacity. They dare to call our ancient religion as foreign? Come on. There's a limit to how much you can stoop down. Oh my God. See, this, what audacity do you have? First of all, you being a westernized colonial mental setup person, how can you talk about our indigenous religions? And how dare you talk about the most ancient religion as foreign? Let's get some facts straight. In Hinduism, we worship Pachayama, the Mother Earth. And same way, the indigenous traditions in Bolivia worship Pachamamba, Mother Earth. I'm just quoting one of the examples. Like this, we live in so much of oneness, so many things. What we are having is matching. We are in oneness. You are able to, what audacity do you have to call us as foreign? This is violating the fundamental constitutional rights enshrined in the Bolivian constitution itself. And it's also going against all the rights. And you're hurting our religious sentiment. You are putting down the treaties such as UNDRIP, and you are violating these.
And I also want to make it very clear that we have never tried to put down or shoved the Hindu religion in your throat, did we? Did we come and approach you? Did we tell you to get converted to Hinduism? No, we didn't. Then what gives you the rights? Did any of the indigenous come and complain that we came and tried to convert any of them? Show me the proof. Where is the evidence? Other than just perpetrating and trying to make false, airy, hot steamed statements, you guys have no credibility at all. And just because trying to use your media power, your media muscle, and trying to use the influence, and let's look at facts. Why don't we look at facts over here? You know what? I actually, all the viewers who are watching us live, in this age that we are in, thanks to the AI, that we are looking at, facts can be checked by every one of us independently. We are no more dependent on these anti-indigenous, Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mesic, indigenous, anti-indigenous media, which is there. First, when social media came out, the mainstream media got a big hit because they lost all their credibility. They couldn't push their agendas. Then these social medias, the influencers were bought by this mainstream media. Now the information is much more decentralized and information is available at everyone's fingertips. And not just information, expertise with facts are now available. So I am having an open challenge to every one of you guys. Look up, Google up, look at the statistics of the media which is there in Bolivia. The more than 60 percentage of the media houses in Bolivia is European owned. I am not telling this. Verify it for yourself. Is owned by European agencies. Now, what does this mean? Who is trying to colonize here? Media? Kailasa. It is the media which is very clear. And I want to share this with all our indigenous brothers and sisters, not back off, because we know we have been in constant communication with the local indigenous communities, the local indigenous people, the local indigenous nations who are there, because they have been threatened at gunpoint, just like how our monks were threatened at gunpoint, just like how they were tortured. Same way, these indigenous traditions, communities, people, and nations have been threatened and are facing continuous persecution. We will continue to stand with you. We will stand for what is right. Do not back off. These anti-indigenous media are just trying to show their power, the muscle power, by trying to create a network of these anti-indigenous sentiments and trying to show Kailasa as colonizers. And they speak otherwise. Let's look at facts, not try to get into opinions. And for all the viewers out there, you guys can verify each and every information that we are sharing here by yourself.
The jokes are on you, the racist media channels, because you're clearly exposed. You are European owned and you had the audacity to call us out as colonizers. Oh my God. This is just so ridiculous and honestly funny because no one is going to buy this up. Because here you're claiming things which you are and trying to portray it on us, and you're trying to push your one-sided narrative. Actually, this is clearly repeat like the history ironically repeating itself. This is the same thing what the colonizers tried to do when they tried their divide and rule policies. They tried to spread hatred. They tried to spread false narratives within the communities by trying to split the communities, divide them so you can rule them. But I think now we are smart enough. We have the right information thanks to AI and the Tyaga of our great ancestors and the supreme pontiff of Hinduism, because of whom now we all have access to our true history, because of which we will not let that fate repeat itself. So, mind you, before you make such blatant false accusations, because with the help of AI, we're just exposing you more and more. Actually, you're exposing yourself more. Here, it actually shows how much colonial mental setup is coming here. And we will not allow that.
And you're losing credibility. Let's be clear about it. Everybody now knows about your lies. All of you anti-indigenous media channels, you are becoming a laughable stock. So it's better for you only to quickly issue apologies to Kailasa and to all the indigenous nations, clearly stating how you've been wrong, how you've not done your fact checking, if you don't want to continue being a laughable stock. So now the lies are out and nobody can deny it. There are facts. Even the indigenous people are coming forward. They've been threatened. They are coming forward and telling how you guys are persecuting them. You guys are denying their rights, their indigenous rights, their rights to self-determination.
And if we actually look at the long list of laws that these guys have been violating, I can actually put an entire list and read it out to every one of you. Let's look at some of the top violations of laws by El Mundo or Eldebar or Ana Bolivia, Observatorio, and Vision 360, Ahora, Tinformas, Noticias, All of you guys who try to claim yourself pro, try to show us you are the defenders of the indigenous communities and the people out there. Why don't we take a fact check at the laws and the constitution that you guys are violating? Let me just take a few moments to indulge myself in it. Let's look at the violations of the Bolivian Constitution 2009. Article 4 speaks about religious freedom that you have violated. Article 21, number 3, it speaks about freedom of thought and spirituality, which once again you have violated. Article 30, point number 2, speaks about the protection of the indigenous people's cultural identity, which you have interfered in, and you feel that you have a lot more intelligence about their tradition than you, and once again violated. Article 98.2, which speaks very clearly about the cultural diversity as the foundation of the plurinational state. But here, once again, you guys think that you are the most civilized people and that the indigenous people need so called defenders like you and trying to exploit them. Law number 45 says very clearly and it prohibits discrimination based on religion and cultural identity, which is what exactly you guys have done to Kailasa. Law number 73 recognizes the indigenous jurisdictional authority that lies with the indigenous communities, and you have violated that by dictating terms on who they need to enter into relations with and who they cannot. Law number 1257, it says very clearly that ILO convention applies for the Bolivian constitution. Now, I can go on and on. You want to take up the list of international legal instruments? Whether it is the the Convention on Human Rights, whether the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, whether it's the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, whether it is the ILO Convention of 169, all of these things have been right royally broken by you, right royally abused by the anti-indigenous media, by every single one of you guys. And the facts are all out. What we are presenting here is based on very same articles that you have spoken. Let's be clear. People have become mature. People are intelligent. People are not fools to just go blindly by the words that you guys utter. You guys think, oh, if we create a lot of noise, people are going to follow our heed. No, things are different. Life has changed. World is different. Please don't think people who are looking at your articles, people who are listening are not stupid. Let's be clear about certain things.
And you're saying that Kailasa deceived these indigenous folks to steal their land. Now, that is absolutely laughable. Deception? Are you serious? Try transparency. Every agreement was witnessed. It was notarized, it was protocolized, it was documented and translated into the local languages as well. And calling the indigenous leaders gullible enough to be tricked insults the intelligence. We are partners, not predators, unlike you, unlike the colonial playbook you're cribbing from. The ILO Convention of 169 demands free, prior, and informed consent, and we've got it covered. Your narratives are not just wrong, it is patronizing as hell. So you should really step up your game now.
No, I think each of these racist media channels, the community, literally colonized media channels, need to speak up right now for yourself, because every point that you have posted in your articles is only exposing your colonial mental setup more and more. It is only showing you how colonial you are. Your colonial arrogance is what is coming through here. And let's be very clear, AI has changed this game. Your false narratives don't sell anymore. You're talking about our indigenous people as gullible people, and you have the audacity to be able to demean them. Let's be clear. Our indigenous people, our indigenous traditions are much older than many of the modern nations. And We are these ancient people, and we will stand for the rights of the ancient people. We will stand together, and we will not let colonizers like you to come and divide us. And this is also a call out for all our indigenous brothers and sisters. Understand, this is exactly what happened in our past, in our history, that's trying to repeat itself, which we can become aware of and which we can stop. Here you can see clearly, we all are indigenous people. And here we have some colonizers who are coming, trying to create a divide between us, the exact divide and rule policy. And they're trying to incite hatred about each other to each other. This is what is happening right now. And it's time for all of us to wake up so that we do not repeat the same mistakes that we did in the past.
It's very important, however, for us to every one of us to understand the words that are carefully used by these anti-indigenous media trying to gaslight the very own indigenous people for whom Kailasa has been continuously working and supporting, by demeaning them, by telling that they were tricked, just like how we Hindus were continuously brainwashed that it is because of Hinduism we suffered. Same way, the indigenous people are being brainwashed, the indigenous people in Bolivia and the indigenous nations are being brainwashed by these colonial powers, by these the anti-indigenous agencies, the anti-indigenous media, by brainwashing them and trying to show that they are illiterate and they do not have the intelligence to choose or to define what is right and what is wrong. This is exactly the very same way how we Hindus were targeted, how we Hindus were attacked, how generations and generations of Hindus were forced, even till date. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Swamiji, has been working tirelessly to make us Hindus feel confident about our own tradition, forget about others. Even Hindus, we don't believe in our tradition. We ourselves feel it is Hinduism the reason why I'm suffering today. No. And this is systematically, for all of you actually just look at it from a third person's perspective, you will understand this is the exact same thing that is happening in Bolivia as well. By this anti-indigenous media, by they trying to tell that Kailasa tricked them. They're not making a statement that Kailasa is wrong, but they are making a statement much deeper than that, that the indigenous people are gullible, the indigenous people are not intelligent, and they cannot protect themselves. Come on, let's speak the facts. The indigenous people in Bolivia have protected the Amazon for the last hundreds of decades, which are there. It is you people who allow all the illegal mining, illegal deforestation, and have led to the loss of habitat which is there. If not for the indigenous traditions, indigenous people who were there, by now the entire continent would have been grazed to land and to dust. It is because of the sacrifice of the indigenous people, whether it is in our Hindu tradition or whether it is in all the indigenous traditions out there. It is because of them that today earth stands as earth today. Because for every one of us, earth is not a material, earth is our mother, earth is our deity. Unlike for you people who exploit, we are here who worship. So let's get the facts clear. And for all the viewers who are watching us live, this is very important for every one of us to understand how the colonial mindset is used, not just Hindus. This is an opener for everyone to understand, not just Hindus. Colonizers are actively perpetrating against all the indigenous. And why is Kailasa attacked so much? Because Kailasa is voicing out against all of these atrocities actively. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is taking all the arrows on his back and protecting the right of these indigenous traditions, nations, and people all across the world. And that is the sole reason why there is so much of attack on Kailasa, why there is so much of effort that is put to demean and delegitimize Kailasa.
See, one thing you should know also, all you colonialist mental people, indigenous nations are way more advanced. We are way more advanced civilizations than any one of you. whether it is in sciences, whether it is communicating with nature. We worship nature, we worship mountains, we worship trees, we worship rivers. We know the science of bringing rain. We know the science to stop climate change, to stop global warming. But are you guys letting us do it? No, because you're only interested in destroying us. And whether it is even sciences, it is we indigenous people who have brought to humanity so many sciences, whether it is in medicine, whether it is mathematics, whether it is engineering, you name it. So it is really high time that you stop your play and you stop putting false allegations on indigenous people. You stop persecuting indigenous peoples as your ancestors have been doing for millennia. This is not going to work anymore, because now it is the time, the age of AI, where information and expertise is available readily to everybody. So the trick that you're trying to use is not going to work anymore.
And actually, it is because we are now protecting the Amazon forest. We are now supporting in the protection of the Amazon forest. That is the reason why, and many of their illegal activities, like illegal mining and all those illegal activities they were trying to do, and they were trying to exploit the indigenous communities there. Now that is being stopped because we have a clear rule given as per Kailasa's constitution. I don't know how many of you know of this. As per the very constitution in Kailasa, we are not allowed to cut trees, because trees, like so beautifully Swamiji says, trees, animals, every one of us, not just human beings, but all beings have the equal rights and need to be treated as Paramashiva, God. This is the kind of powerful constitution we have, and that is what we are practicing, that is what we are living. And because of this, many of the poachers or the illegal miners, they are not able to continue their vested interests, their illegal activities anymore, and that their vested interests are getting threatened. That is also one of the reasons why these colonial mental people, the racist media channels, are propagating these lies.
And even factually, let us look at some of the reports here. The United Nations report clearly that nearly every Latin American country exhibits the pattern where the indigenous lands consistently show low forestation rates compared to other areas, highlighting the effectiveness of the indigenous practices in preserving forests. Same way, indigenous communities employ sustainable techniques such as fallow farming and controlled ash and burn methods, which allow forests to regenerate. These practices are rooted in their cultural and spiritual connection to the nature, treating it as a living entity with intrinsic rights. The indigenous are the guardians of the biodiversity. Indigenous territories in the Amazon basin hold almost half of the region's remaining intact forests. Their stewardship has been crucial in the and mitigating the carbon. Now, this is not what I am speaking. This is what the United Nations has published as a report. So, if not for the indigenous people today, you guys would have not had bread and breakfast for you to eat and for you to feed your children and family out in your house, because long back the earth would have become a scorching ball of fire. It is because of us indigenous traditions, it is because of us indigenous people that we protect the ancient living science, that we protect the truth, the ancient sciences, which you guys have been actively violating and actively destroying. So when you make statements such as Kailasa tricked the indigenous people, be very clear who you're pointing out at. You are making a very, very, very powerful and a deceptive statement trying to defame the indigenous nations, the indigenous people, and they are intelligent enough. And this is substantiated with enough evidence. And I hope you got a taste of it from our answer this time.
And I also wanted to add to this because, like, just to give an example, right? Now, if you see the kind of vested interests that are getting, see, why are these racist media channels, the colonialists who are trying to attack us right now. Why are they attacking? See, for last so many thousand years, for 15,000 plus years, the indigenous nations like Kayapo, Yanomami, and many such nations in Amazon had practiced sustainable agroforestry, because of which they protected the Amazon forest. But post-colonialization from the 16th century onward, things like resource extraction, disease and genocide, industrial exploitation, all of these things started. It is only post 1950, 17% of Amazon got destroyed. And now we are seeing the worst in the last centuries. We are now in this last 2, 3 years, we're seeing the worst of it. But now, because as United Ancient Nations, we are putting our foot down, stopping this. That is the reason why they are getting threatened more. Understand? Because we have the environment protection treaties where we are having clear policies of no cutting trees, no allowing any kind of illegal mining or poaching. Because of these laws that are being placed, and it is threatening these colonialists who have been exploiting the land there, exploiting the forest, destroying it. Now, so much of the Amazon is gone. I'm just quoting one example. It is these reasons why the racist, criminal, mental set of media channels are attacking us.
And now, Enmuldo, you're saying that Kailasa has bribed these indigenous nations to sell their heritage. Bribes? Are you serious? Now, that is a very spicy accusation, and you have to prove it. We would bribe them. You need to give us the names, the dates, and the receipts, and we are really waiting for it because your imagination just keeps on working overtime. But where are the facts? You need to give us the facts. Our investments aren't some shady payoff scheme. They are community-driven, built from the ground up with the full consent and collaboration of the entire indigenous community, tailored to their needs and their nation's priorities. Think about development, cultural preservation, and that is real progress. Not a single coin moves without their say-so. And you are just tossing around wild claims. Here's the reality that you need to know. Our humanitarian aid comes from sweat, from sacrifice and voluntary contributions. There's no coercion, there's no taxes, there's no exploitation. In Kailasa is the only country that doesn't have any taxes. And compare that to your sabotage by headline tactics. And what's the deal? Jealous of the good that we are doing? Or just being mad about the truth that doesn't fit your narrative? No, you can't just keep doing that anymore because the world, the indigenous people are getting awakened to how they are being persecuted, to how they are being denied their rights.
And the economic components of our agreements, they are not payments, quote unquote, let me make it very clear. They were not payments made for land, but they are investments into community development, into environmental protection, into cultural preservation. Now, you tell me this. Who enters into thousands of years of agreement where we continue to invest in them? Tell me. No one does. Why? Because these kind of agreements, which are for thousands of years, are only for the protection. You want examples? Why don't you get Escazú Agreement in 2018, the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, the Antarctic Treaty in 1959? Why not? Even the very popular, the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. This signed means in perpetuity. What exactly does this mean? When we are able to make a bold statement that we are entering into this partnership agreement for thousands years, the reason being we are joining our hands with the indigenous people there. We are investing in the community development. We are not making payment for land. We are not bribing the indigenous. We are investing in the community development. These resources are going to be managed by those communities. We are not putting regulations. We are not putting rules that it has to be spent in X, Y, Z. We are giving it to them. they are going to be able to spend it according to their priorities and their governance structure. Kailasa's humanitarian aid is a community driven and it has been built from the ground with the full consent of the entire community. Please understand, we have enough and more photographs that we have been showing, we have presented as well, where we are not doing anything in secrecy. Everything that we have done, that we are doing, is absolutely transparent. We have been actively working to support. Do you think that we are going there and we are hiding in some place? Absolutely not. Every day, we are feeding thousands of people. Every day, we are providing education to thousands of people. Every day, we are providing healthcare to thousands of people. Over 150 indigenous and ancient nations and kingdoms are already part of the United Ancient Nations that is spearheaded by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. This intergovernmental organization, the United Ancient Nations, has already provided grants to over 100 plus countries towards continuously supporting them to preserve their rights, to preserve what they hold as their tradition, their heritage. Just to support them, Kailasa has been actively voicing, Kailasa has been actively working. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has day and night worked. As we just stated earlier, our aid is not gathered through taxes, just like how most established and most modern nations do. No. But we raise it through hard work. And it is through the sacrifices of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Paramashivam, and the contributions of the hard-working individuals of a persecuted minority, indigenous community, the Hindu community, those who are inspired to do the same, witnessing the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's relentless sacrifice and unshakable grit and commitment towards this mission. Kailasa is very clear that we are committed to our humanitarian contributions. Our contributions are not sectarian based. We are not community diverse. We do not discriminate. We do not judge. We provide our services to one and all. And all of these things are facts. And how come it is conveniently swallowed and misinterpreted and arm twist by you when you're presenting it in your so-called articles to defend the indigenous? You do have a lot of things that you need to answer and get the things straight on your record. If not, we are not going to keep quiet. You need to understand that similar things has happened even earlier. Kailasa is not going to back off. Some big time media houses have also tried to play the same game that you did. Let's take some examples. For example, the Washington Post in US, the MSN, the Week, the Outlook, all these big time guys tried to play their cards the same way and had to remove their Hinduphobic and defamatory articles and spreading the similar disinformation that you are doing. Now, you need to follow the that you have inflicted. Otherwise, be ready to face the consequences. The world has evolved. People are not fools.
And let's be honest about it. Who even has the guts, the confidence to go into 1,000-year agreement? Kailasa does, because we've been present for thousands and thousands of years. For more than 20,000 years, we've been around. And that is not just some fiction. We have documented record of our history since 20,000 years ago. We have the oldest constitution of the world 10,000 years ago. We are the inventor of democracy. So Kailasa has the guts, the confidence to go into 1,000-year-old agreement. And here you are saying that the indigenous communities want Kailasa gone. Are you serious? This claim is absolutely nonsense and you need to shut it down right away. Indigenous communities stand firmly with Kailasa, united in unwavering support. The idea that they want us gone is complete fiction, cooked up by the anti-indigenous lobbies such as you guys, El Mundo, Opinion, Awaska, Infobe, and Brujula and whatnot. It is just complete fiction trying to push your agenda. And there's no handful of naysayers here, just a loud, cohesive clique trying to drown out the truth with intimidation. You guys, you bullies need to stop harassing indigenous nations and communities forcing them to toe a fabricated line. And it's not just misleading, this is outright disrespectful to indigenous sovereignty, who have been around much more longer than you guys.
Absolutely. And also, let's talk about this sanctions demand, which is pure absurdity. Calling for sanctions against our diplomatic partnership doesn't just sound ridiculous, it's illegal under the Bolivian law. And it also trashes the UN Charter's core principle of sovereign equality. This isn't reporting, it's meddling, plain and simple. Who handed you the right to dictate terms to the indigenous people and their allies? No one. So take your baseless allegations and coercive taxes elsewhere. They do not hold water here. I think El Mundo, you need to reconsider on too much, actually every bit of your false narratives, because they are here only exposing your colonialism more and more, your hatred, your anti-indigenous racist mental setup more and more.
And in fact, let's also look at the other partners in crime. I would like to list out the various anti-indigenous medias, mafia, and the Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mesic media out there. Let's look at the names of these people. RTP Bolivia, Brujula Digital, Tan Medios, Vision 360, Ana Bolivia, Sumendo Voces, Prensel Lanera, Inoticiasbo, LC Globeweb, Infodias, El Peridico, Eju, Inoticias, Lu 17, Diary Panorama, Airball, Americtive, and FS Servicios, Swiss Info, Noticias Protagonis, El País, ABC, Publica Prensa Latina, Opinion, Eldabar, Argente, all of you people, the answers that we have been giving is a common answer for each and every one of you. We are going to strip down each and every one of those false allegations that you guys have been claiming, and we are going to expose your hypocrisies to the entire world. It is not that we are going to keep quiet. We are acting, we are working, we are voicing in every one of the steps. We are going to be taking legal steps. We are going to be actively spreading the information, the truth, exposing your lies on all the international channels, international platforms that are there. And at the same time, put in all our efforts to strengthen our activities and to support the indigenous people who are there on the ground. We are not going to be backing off, and let's see who's going to have the final laugh. For all you indigenous, anti-indigenous media out there, either you all apologize, get your records straight, or get ready to face the legal consequences from every direction.
And El Mundo, I want to address this specifically to you. You're saying that Kailasa's shady talks with the Bolivian officials. Let's get this very clear. Diplomacy isn't shady. It's how nations get work done. And what do you know about diplomacy? Engaging officials is standout, not scandalous. And meanwhile, you're ignoring the real exploiters, strong arming these communities. Funny how they slip your radar? Our talks respect Bolivian sovereignty and international norms. You're not covering dirt. You're deflecting from the real culprits who are bankrolling your blind spot. So once again, you need to stop what you're doing because now you are exposed. All the indigenous communities know the lies that all of you anti-indigenous media channels have been plotting to prevent the empowerment of indigenous nations. And see, let's look at the bigger picture as well, the Hindu ethnocide and the Hindu genocide. And zooming out for a second, Hindus endured centuries of genocide. 500 million Hindus were massacred. 500 million Hindus. Millions were enslaved. And traditions were just raised by colonial and religious invaders. Kailasa isn't a pipe dream. It's a resurrection of that legacy. And by trashing us, you're just attacking a nation, an indigenous nation. And by doing that, you are complicit in cultural erasure. In Bolivia, your smear job lines up perfectly with corporate giants itching to strip mine indigenous lands. Is that a coincidence? Hardly. And who is cashing your checks while indigenous rights burn? Your legal.
Who even gives? Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask who even gives these media channels a right to talk about diplomacy? Like, what do you know about diplomacy? Actually, we as Hindus have the earliest records of diplomacy. If you see 16,500 years before itself, we have clear records of Hindu diplomacy. We have the earliest form of diplomacy. These references are found in so many different places. You can see here, I'm showing to you right now, the earliest reference of diplomacy from even before the Ramayana era between sage Agastya and King Ravana, where they sign a treaty, a peace treaty. This is from the Vedic era, 11,000 BCE. Or you can see it in King Rajaraja Cholan and with the Song dynasty, or whether it was the Pandyas with the Roman Empire. This is all 3126 BCE. Same way, the Chola dynasty and Srivijaya Empire, the Khmer dynasty and Chola collaboration. These are some of the earliest diplomatic relations treaties that we have. We have these, and we as Hindus have been long practicing diplomacy. Who gives a media house the right to talk about diplomacy? Understand, every claim that you're making is only putting your credibility down more and more. Better get your facts straight, or it's only ending you in a deeper trouble, or you're going to face very strong legal consequences. Because understand, the international community is right now. I just wanted to request all the viewers that are here with us, also post and share with us which country are you from right now. Because I know here the global supporters of Kailasa span around the world because the Hindu diaspora is spread so vast. We are having people from US, Canada, Asia, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, India, Nepal, Malaysia. I'm seeing France, Guadeloupe. We have so many people around the world who are standing up for the truth. I request all the viewers, take a moment. Please share here. Which country are you here right now from, joining us from? Please take a moment and post it here because I request all those fake colonialist media channels, kindly take a note of this because you're going to be facing very strong repercussions from the global international community that is very clearly seeing and getting it, your colonial mental setup is getting exposed in front of all of them.
At the same time, another thing that I wanted to also state here very clearly is how you guys have been able to gaslight the indigenous people out there. Just like how we asked a couple of minutes back, who is telling and who is demanding that Kailasa is unwelcomed and Kailasa is not accepted by the indigenous? Just blatant lies. There has not been a single reference. There is no such statement that has been made by the actual indigenous communities who are there. It is just blatant lies that is fabricated by you people. And we have been continuously working with all the legitimate indigenous communities. A single one of them has spoken against Kailasa. Rather, it's the other way around. It is the indigenous communities who have been working and they are feeling so much more empowered by Kailasa, seeking support during the historical persecution that they have been going through by the anti indigenous media, such as you guys, who dictate how they need to live. Doesn't this sound a little funny and horrific at the same time, where they are given the rights as per the constitution, but who dictates actually? It's you guys who are a nobody there. And you guys dictate terms on how they live, what they need to do, who they need to engage with, what relationship they need to enter into, who they can sign and establish diplomatic relations with. Let's be very clear, your intent, your idea, your context with which you guys have been functioning, each and every one of the anti indigenous media houses who have tried to exploit this entire situation is very clear. In fact, we did have even a glimpse of how and what kind of torture you guys have been giving for the indigenous people out there. When our monks and our nuns were abducted, when they were kidnapped, when they're forcefully detained, you guys had the cheapness to go spy and to be able to go around and show the photographs, hide and take the photographs of what is going on. When you are able to go to that extent, why you guys were never able to show the difficulties that are faced by the indigenous communities out there? Because you don't care about them. As simple and straightforward as that. This is a systematic persecution that is caused by you guys. It is not a coincidence. It is a very thoroughly planned disinformation campaign that is being spread to suppress and oppress the indigenous rights and the indigenous nations, the indigenous people.
Actually, I want to highlight a very important point based on what was just shared, because this is systematic and we have seen this pattern repeat so many times. Like, I just want to quote an example from the El Periodico racist media channels article. We had just shared with all of you yesterday, and even day before yesterday, we were sharing with all of you about how when our monks, when they were going to get supplies for continuing their services, for which purpose they were getting into the boat to just go to the next town, they had already planted some of their mercenaries to go and attack our monks, right? This is what had actually happened. And because the indigenous people, the local indigenous people did not attack us. They were in fact very, very friendly with us. Even now they want us there. But this anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic magazine, the media channel, El Periodico, claims that the people, the local people, had gone and attacked to try getting some documents. This is exactly like how they do it each time. I want to take us back to the year 2010. 2010, just on the 1st of March 2010, where there's a large Annadan that happened in Tiruvannamalai. And after the Annadan, people had all, like Swamiji had said, I think some few lakhs people had come. And after all of them had gone to rest, at that hour of night, there were mercenaries who were planted in multiple locations, in different ashrams. And we were not aware of what was going on. And at the same time, the very next morning, there was a heinous attack that was launched, trying to attack and assassinate the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, who at that time was there physically in Tiruvannamalai. And do you know how the media had projected? And even before any one of us knew, the media was already there with all their vehicle, their cameras, everything, and already started streaming. It was as if they were just waiting. The mercenaries were just waiting for the cue from the director to be able to go and attack so that it can be captured and projected everywhere. And that's exactly what happened. And they started claiming falsely that the locals were attacking. And that's the same pattern we're seeing now, same thing repeating even in Bolivia. Not a single of those people who came with arms like the rifles and knives and guns and threatening our monks at gunpoint, none of them were indigenous. But see how manipulative these media channels are. El Periodico, I want your explanation on this. How can you claim, first of all, you are not an indigenous person. And those people who are attacking, they are not indigenous. How can you manipulate the facts and try to claim and project as if the indigenous people are?
I also want to use this opportunity to bring to light to all the Hindus around the world. When we look at these as an isolated attack, when we look at these as isolated incidents, rather, we feel, oh, okay, they did some mistake, so they are facing it. No. Now you can see the same pattern, not just repeating within the countries, but across the entire world. So, what does this actually mean? It very clearly defines how there are larger forces that are controlling the narratives that are being set forth. What we are looking at is a war. This is the fact. It may not be with guns, it may not be with ammunitions, but that does not take it away from the fact that what we Hindus are facing, what we indigenous people are facing, is a war on our rights. And even every one of us are going to be burned and destroyed in the same war. It is a fact. It is every one of our right. It is each and every one of our responsibility to make sure that this information reaches out to as many people as possible, to empower as many indigenous communities as possible, to voice out and be the voice of the indigenous people around the world. It is our responsibility, following suit of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Paramashivam, who has dedicated his entire life, sacrificed his entire life for this one purpose. It is not the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism uses Hinduism to exploit anything, no, but because of holding strong to the Hindu identity, it is because of holding on to the Hindu legitimacy that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is being attacked. We have a comment from Amu. She's sharing that our Hindu community in US is also facing attack, especially in the campuses. Hindu phobia has risen from 2021. Exactly, Ma. What you're telling is exactly true. This is exactly what we are seeing here as well. And we Hindus are criminally negligent, where we feel the attack, the fire is not on my house. When it comes to my house, we will see. That is how we lost the entire tradition. We have another comment from Moo. She's sharing, yes, US, Canada, Malaysia are some countries where the attacks against Hindus have increased dramatically. Exactly. It is what we as Hindus have missed doing fundamentally is being exploited by these anti-indigenous, Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mesic media, Hindu-mesic elements and powers which are there. So we have to stand for what is the truth. We have to defend for what is right. And despite the relentless persecution that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has been going through, that Kailasa has been going through, we continue to stand for what is right. And we also want to give this as a call for every one of you to do the same. For every one of you to stand with us, to stand with Kailasa, to stand with all the indigenous and protect what rightfully is ours.
And we also have Ma Robin Taylor, who is saying the Pandavas, with the guidance of Krishna, emerged victorious. All the Kauravas were annihilated, and only the 5 Pandava brothers and Krishna survived. Choose Paramashiva, he has already won. Yes, absolutely, Ma. And see, we also need to understand this is a war that we are going through. This is just like how the Mahabharata war happened at that time, where Krishna emerged victorious. Once again, we are going through a war. So it is very important that all of us, we get awakened to this and we drop the criminal negligence and we take action so that the same history of persecution that we've been going through doesn't get repeated. And see, all of these media channels, they are falsely accusing the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, of rape, of sexual assault, of kidnapping. I mean, what right do they have? How dare they? Because we Hindus, we are not doing anything about it. But I do want to ask these media channels also, what right do you have? How dare you accuse the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, the ecclesiastical head of 2 billion Hindus, and also saying that he's self-proclaimed? But don't worry, we're going to go there and you're going to get your fair share for that comment as well. But let me just give you the facts about what you're saying, that he's wanted for rape, for kidnapping and sexual assault. And these statements being spread are nothing but blatant lies. And we have irrefutable court documents that categorically prove that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has never, ever been convicted of any crimes, period. And the hatred...
Swamiji was exonerated. The US courts exonerated Swamiji.
Exactly. And these so-called victims, they've been imprisoned, they've been fined over 12 million US dollars, and they've also been deported from the United States. And you see, this hatred that is being directed at the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism stems from the simple one fact that he has revived a Hindu state. And certain anti-Hindu forces, such as these media, they cannot just digest this. And you see, also one thing is, since the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism Swamiji has already been exonerated by competent US courts, as per the doctrine of res judicata, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism should not face relitigation of the same issue by the same false accusers in any subsequent proceedings. And additionally, double jeopardy protects the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Swamiji, from being tried for the same issue twice. But however, these same false allegations by the same false accusers are being still litigated in India, invoking vexatious litigation or abuse of the court process. And you see, I would like actually, Matadva Priya, if you can share about the false kidnapping, because you've been directly involved in that. So I think you should definitely share about this.
Yeah, I think because they have falsely portrayed as if I was kidnapped. And we had to prove, and this was such a baseless accusation. See, all the accusations till now that have been levied upon Swamiji have been so frivolous and baseless. And like for example, this so-called sexual assault false allegation that's been levied upon Swamiji. Firstly, Swamiji was exonerated. The US courts had exonerated. And on top of that, there was never a single victim, a victimless rape charge. And there was no person who was ever kidnapped because they put a false accusation saying, I was kidnapped. And we had to fight for it for so many years to prove that we were not kidnapped. And we have won in that case. Come on. How many more years are these fake media channels going to drag the same thing? Why don't you publish the court report where we are clearly shown that we are not kidnapped? The court has dismissed it as absolutely baseless and frivolous and dismissed the whole case. How come that is not there in your reports? We demand answers now. We want answers from these fake racist media channels. How dare you put the accusation of kidnap when the court order has clearly proven that there is no kidnap? I want an answer because we demand this justice, because now you are even violating and you are showing as if you know more than what the courts have ordered. So we demand justice right now. The media channels have to answer. These anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic media channels have to answer for all these false allegations.
And, you know, who are they? Really, who are they to put such allegations on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, ecclesiastical head of 2 billion Hindus? They are nothing. And, just here's the grim reality of what he had to go through. He had to go through 70 assassination attempts, 250 sexual assaults, 120 false legal cases, more than 17,000 hours of hate speech, and 25,000 print articles in more than 50 countries. Now, how dare they saying that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is wanted for rape, for kidnapping? What guts do they have?
No, I
And that is
really
a
want an
question.
answer from them. Actually, this whole case, it's so baseless, ma. How are they able to even put that, even after the court order? First of all, you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But on Swamiji's case, they made it otherwise. But even after the court has dismissed the case, and we have won in that case, how dare these media channels still carry this false narrative? Now we demand an answer from you. You are answerable to us. How dare you spread such malicious hatreds, which is very clear. Even after the court documents are there, which clearly show that we are not kidnapped, how dare you call us as kidnapped? So this is proving it more and more how every statement of yours is baseless, frivolous, and therefore you need to apologize. You need to take down all these fake news right away, or what you're going to face is going to be heavy, serious legal charges.
And just one thing that I want to really point out here, that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has been exonerated more than 10 years ago by the US courts. More than 10 years ago. And these anti-Hindu media are still spreading the same false narratives, trying to show that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is still a criminal, is still wanted for rape and kidnapping. More than 10 years ago. So how come they are not publishing the exoneration of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism? And that is a question actually also for all Hindus. How come Hindus do not know about these facts? And how come we are not being ferocious, serious about answering these media channels? Because we are not. That is why even after 10 years, these anti-Hindu racist media are having the guts to do that.
And you anti-indigenous media, the Hindu-phobic and Hindu-mesic media, your so-called rape allegations, you guys literally run a recycling program because no matter how many evidences we have, it doesn't matter to you. Your regurgitation of the disproven rape allegations, they represent the journalistic equivalent of drinking spoiled milk and then complaining about the taste. That's exactly what you guys are doing. These allegations that have been thoroughly investigated, adjudicated, and dismissed in multiple jurisdictions. Now, let's look at the timeline of your investigative team has somehow seemed to have missed. In 2010, a deepfake video masterminded by the Hindu Mesic forces was unleashed by the notorious media outlets, and they did it all out to incite hatred against the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. This was followed by a rape case, a malicious one, with one fascinating detail. You know what? As mentioned earlier, the complaint did not even have the victim of rape. Despite this glaring omission, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was unlawfully detained and arrested for 53 days. And during those 53 days, the media claimed that multiple women, some articles reaching as high as 100, had been raped. There is, as per the records, there is not a single woman who has even confirmed as a victim. And despite that, just exactly like what you guys are doing now, did the same, telling that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism had raped over 100 women. Yet, after questioning more than 100 people on the same, despite being bribed, solicited for false victims, the police could not even find one single victim. Be very clear, not a single victim was found. Finally, the police themselves submitted a memo to the court admitting that they had no evidences whatsoever. But why let the police statements and the court documents interfere with your scandal narrative? This exact case was duplicated in the United States as well. and it was promptly dismissed more than 10 years ago. The US courts have not only exonerated the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, but have imposed substantial fines on the accusers for making false allegations and defamation. Over 6 million US dollars of fine has been placed. This judicial decision validates the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's innocence and demonstrates the malicious intent of the accusers, exactly what you are all doing today. This is one of the worst happenings in the entire history. The persecution that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has gone through in the entire history, that is being used and abused by the so-called media, the anti-indigenous media, the anti-Hindu media, Hindu-mistic, Hindu-phobic media, just so that they can continue to live off by abusing and by trying to keep everything under their control, by trying to keep the Hindus brainwashed, by trying to keep the Hindus under control, by trying to keep the indigenous under control. Because if Kailasa grows, if the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is allowed to do what he does, then everyone gets a right to voice for themselves, which they do not want. So it's a very convenient way and a very systematic destruction that has been going on.
And I also want to add in about this deep fake video, which was just mentioned about, because the very COO of that same media house had actually openly come and admitted how it was completely fabricated. We have the top forensic reports, the top most forensic reports that are very clearly showing it is fabricated. Yet, the same thing is again and again being brought up because it's a clear persecution. This is not any kind of a legal situation. No, it's an illegal persecution that is being targeted upon the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Kailasa, and the indigenous nations. The reason why this whole attack is being launched right now is because Swamiji has taken a very powerful stance to give voice to the voiceless. I want to just highlight some statistics to show what was the condition of the indigenous people. The colonialism's greatest hits, a legacy of oops, we stole everything. For example, land theft. 95% of the Amazon's indigenous territories were stolen post 1492. And the colonizers' logic, finders keepers and losers weepers. This was the actual legal defense they had probably. And same way, they had forced labor. 10 million plus indigenous lives were lost in rubber plantations that was being as forced labor by these colonialists. And do you know, 72% of this Bolivia's indigenous peoples live below the poverty line? This is as per the statistics from the World Bank 2023. Same way, 1 in 3 indigenous children in the Amazon suffer chronic malnutrition. This is as per UN FAO. This was the condition. So when Kailasa started flipping the script, where every day, daily free meals have been served the last so many months, transforming their lives, and where we are supporting them to protect their land, where we are empowering people to keep these poachers away, to keep these illegal miners away. And we are supporting with mental health care by teaching them yoga completely for free. It is because of this that these racist, anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic, anti-indigenous media channels are targeting us and attacking us. This is the same pattern we have seen again and again and again. We saw the same thing in 2003. We saw the same thing in 2010. We saw the same thing in 2019. And we're seeing the same thing happen now. It is never the local people. It is never the actual people who are experiencing the benefit ever attack. No. It is these mercenaries who have been paid, brought in, and who are made to be look alike of the existing indigenous people, and they are portrayed. It is just for those video footages. You will see clearly the way it is directed. Exactly as per their camera angles, these people will move, these people will go and attack, and then there will be a story cover. This is what has been happening time and again. That is what we're seeing. This is part of the colonialist playbook. And Hindus, it's time for us to wake up. And I do see many of us are already waking up to the way how Hindu phobic mental setup is spreading everywhere. Hindu phobia is becoming more and more. And we as Hindus need to stand up for this. Hindus' lives matter. Your voice matters. Each one of you, every single one of your voices matter. Don't think the person who's sitting next to you may not be interested in knowing this. No, then you are being a reluctant warrior. Then you are being a cause for many of our brother monks, sister monks there to die. No, it is time to give up on your reluctance. Stop being a reluctant warrior. It is time for us to wake up, like how Bhagavan Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, Shudram Hridayam Daurbalyam Tyaktotishta Parantapa. It is time for us to drop our reluctance, drop being a reluctant warrior, stand up. You need to be a part of this war. All of us need to unite. Tell the people who are next to you that you are seeing, your relatives, your family members, tell them what Hindus are facing. Tell them it's time to wake up from our criminal negligence.
And we also, when we look at this whole happening that have been continuously being repeated across decades, if not centuries, it just makes it so obvious that when character assassination masquerades as journalism, this is exactly the result. The media's fantasy crime novel, where you can actually portray, the way they portray is that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is the villain in these stories. And of course, the media loves its fictional villains. It seems that the journalism that these guys come up with came with a creative writing specializing in character assassination. That is what we are all looking at. When they portray the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as a self proclaimed leader or a pro fascist sect, it is not just wrong, it is just spectacular, almost impressively wrong. Where do they find the words like this? It is like penguins are the rulers of the Sahara is wrong. No, it is not just wrong, it's just impressive the way you guys can go. Let's introduce all of you fellows to something revolutionary in journalism, and they're called as facts. I know it's a very terrifying concept for every one of you media fellows because that is against your money, that is against your industry, that's against your business. So why would you bother about facts? The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's lineage tracks back to tens of thousands of years of Hinduism's oldest and most ancient spiritual institutions. The Supreme Pontiff is the 139th Pontiff of the ancient lineage. He is not just some random person who woke up one morning and decided, oh, the word guru sounds nice, so I am going to become a guru. No, he is not like how you guys just come up one day, you wake up in the night, and then you feel like, okay, tomorrow let's assassinate him, and then plot it out and execute it. No, your so-called self-proclaimed label is the equivalent of calling the Pope that Italian guy with a funny hat who decides that he likes churches. I'm sorry, but this is exactly what you guys are doing. It is not just insulting, it is a demonstrating attack, arrogance, and ignorance. When you call the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as self-proclaimed, you're not just attacking one person, you are attacking the entire Hindu ecclesiastical succession system. Would you call the Dalai Lama self-proclaimed because he was forced into exile? Would you label the Pope as self-proclaimed during the Avignon exile? Why? Your double standards are showing up very evidently, and they are as subtle as a neon sign in a monastery. But this is exactly what you fellows are doing. Same way, your fixation on labeling the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as fugitive. Come on. It reveals that either you are having a profound ignorance of international law, or the other way, which I think is the truth, a very, very deliberate attempt to mislead all your readers. And I think it's both. Interpol, again, another allegation that comes in. Interpol. What do you guys know? The actual international law enforcement organization with the actual authority, which is Interpol, has rejected any request to issue notices on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism based on the evidences provided to you, because Interpol is a legitimate organization that has the rights. Unlike you, mafia, unlike you, anti-indigenous mafia, media, Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mesic media, who just like to throw things around for your breakfast. Indigenous communities are under attack. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has been under attack, and the Interpol has very clearly given a statement that there is no basis on which the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism can be attacked. But apparently, your newsroom has more legal authority than Interpol. What a beautiful, great achievement that you guys have. And also, do you also have, I also have another question for all of you people. Do you also perform like citizens arrest in your spare time? Because that's exactly what you people are doing. Even in terms of your own editorial team, we might understand no conviction means not a fugitive. Please understand, in layman's terms, I'm telling. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is not guilty. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is innocent in every single false accusation that has been cast, that has been deliberately put on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. So, this in layman's terms means if there is no conviction, that means he is not a fugitive. This is a very straightforward equation. And despite nearly 15 years of malicious prosecution and litigation in India, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has never been convicted of any crime. Not one, zero, because he has not committed any crime. And it is anti-indigenous, anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mesic media like you all who try to exploit at every given opportunity, trying to delegitimize, trying to character assassinate and assassinate the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism.
And Maharaj, I would like to add to these false allegations of being a self-proclaimed guru or God, because this is the same accusation that we've been seeing, not just in the Bolivian media attack, but globally, whenever these media channels they would be attacking, they would all be accusing the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as being self-proclaimed. So we should tell what are the facts, and we are going to be showing some pictures also. See, these attacks, these are vicious attacks that reeks of supremacist ideology and prejudice, targeting Hinduism with a series of defamatory narratives. And so these are really undermining the statue of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam, as the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, dismissing his rightful position with disrespect and mockery. And it's also questioning the formal process of identifying and recognizing the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as the incarnation of Paramashiva. There's a very clear science in Hinduism of identifying incarnations, and these media channels are just making a mockery out of it by calling the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as being self-proclaimed.
And the photographs that we were all looking at is not just some Toy Story or some fictional character in a movie that is there. Here, we're looking at the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism being coronated as the head, as the sovereign of the Shamala Pita Sarvagnya Pitam. He has been coronated as the 293rd pontiff of this great ancient tradition. And the rights of the Shamala Pita Sarvagnya Pitam have been documented in history. Even as recent as just before the Indian independence, the British themselves have very clearly recognized the rights that were vested in the pontiff of the Shamala Pita Sarvagnya Pitam. What we're looking at the photographs here is the historical lineage. When we are talking about 293rd as a number, it means the 293rd succession, where the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is the rightful heir and the inheritor for this great ancient civilization. And this is one. Like this, there are 21 such ancient kingdoms, ecclesiastical institutions, of which the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is the head. As you all can see, right from the time of Paramashiva, the lineage goes all the way to the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, and all of this is well documented. for all our media friends and all the anti-indigenous Hindu-phobic media out there, why don't you open your eyes for once? Go and look at facts rather than presenting your own opinions and your own false narratives. If you are interested in any kind, if you are even interested in a bit of integrity to the journalistic values that you are all explicitly supposed to uphold, you would look at the facts and evidences. I'd like to invite one of you, head over to kailasa.org, read about these for yourself, and learn the real truth, learn the real history before you try to come and try to just wishy-wash whatever you want here out in the public. Public and the mass is not a spitting bowl where you just spit whatever you don't like. No, we are people who want intelligence. We want information. We want rights to what is really happening. And that is our right. And you are expected to serve the public that way. So head over to kailasa.org, look at these facts for yourself and speak with evidences. Don't just try to put out blatant voices, letting out your steam just because nobody out there in your country is interested in listening to you. Don't try to pick up different things from everywhere.
And what you're reporting deliberately obscures is the transformation of this case from prosecution to persecution, a fact recognized by the international human rights lawyers and organizations from worldwide. I just want to highlight a few distinguished legal experts, including Jeffrey Robertson Casey, who is a former UN Justice Council jurist, and Maliha Wilson, who is a former Assistant Deputy Attorney General of Ontario, and numerous others have provided legal opinions confirming that what Swamiji, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, is facing is a persecution. In February 2024, the Ramanagara Indian Court acknowledged the heinous crimes committed by co-conspirators against the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and Kailasa, charging Lenin Karupan with rape, extortion, and criminal intimidation. The massive systematic anti-Hindu media campaign has caused documented harm in over 100,000 instances. 70 plus assassination attempts directly on the life of Swamiji, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. 250 plus sexual assaults were done on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism's monks, nuns, and disciples by these Hindu-phobic forces. And 120 plus false legal cases, 17,000 hours of hate speech and defamation campaign in online media, 25,000 defamatory articles across more than 50 countries. You are answerable to all of this. Why are you not showing these? These are the facts. So these are the facts that too being supported by so many human rights lawyers. How come you as a media channel are not publishing a single one of these?
And I also want to add a couple of informations out here. And what is more interesting along with what we're looking at is that you don't really care about anything as a matter of fact. You don't care about the evidences. You don't care about the facts. You don't care about the laws. You don't care about anything. The bottom line of this entire thing is the res judicata and double jeopardy, and you don't care about anything at all. Now, when we look at the scale, as per the res judicata, when we look at the scale, the judiciary of US is way high in comparison whether with India or various other countries which are there. So what is it supposed to mean? If the same case is tried in US and there is already an exoneration, there is already a verdict that has been given, then naturally everyone is supposed to be following the same. Now, it is based on this. I also want to let you know, it is based on this that Interpol has very clearly, categorically refused that there are any accusations on the SPH, because naturally, 10 years back, I want to reiterate it on this again and again, 10 years back, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was exonerated. he was completely exonerated, and that same is the only thing that is running around so far. And even now, it is only relentless persecution that is going on. As we heard earlier, from prosecution, it is persecution that we have been going through. It is lawfare that is there. Under the doctrine of res judicata, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is not supposed to face relitigation for the same issues by the same accusers in any subsequent proceedings. And double jeopardy further protects the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism for being tried twice for the exact same thing. Yet, the same allegation by the same false accusers continue to be litigated in India, and they keep getting regurgitated by media outlets like yours. This is a textbook example of vexatious litigation and journalistic malpractice. What you people are just absolute rowdies and thugs who are trying to using the garb of media, but trying to spread hatred in the entire world. The truth
And
is very simple, but what to do? It is inconvenient for your narrative.
absolutely, because this isn't about justice, it's about silencing a powerful Hindu voice. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism revived a Hindu state, and certain anti Hindu forces cannot tolerate it. Your reporting isn't just biased, it is complicit in the systematic persecution. More than 40 media outlets from 14 countries have already removed similar defamatory content and issued apologies after recognizing their errors. They chose integrity. What are you going to choose? The world is watching. Right now, you can see the comment section. We have people around the world. We are seeing people. Actually, I'm seeing so many people have posted their countries. Malaysia, Singapore, Canada, USA, so many USA. And I'm seeing Guadeloupe, so many France. You can see the comment section. You can know for yourself what wide range of audience the international community is watching you right now. So you can decide, what are you going to choose? See, the world is watching. Truth does not require your validation. Hindu traditions don't cease to exist because you have misinterpreted them. Sorry. You need to choose wisely. Your credibility, if it still exists, hangs in the balance. So better make your choice right.
And also make sure that when you try to come over and try to put these false, blatant allegations, whether it's on the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism or the indigenous communities who are out there, remember one thing: the world has advanced. The world is not still sitting in ancient times, which actually is dependent on you for getting any kind of information. The world is not dependent on you. In fact, just like how you use all of these informations, twist them as per your narrative, and you use them same way, in fact, even other way, the world has become intelligent enough to see the fakeness, to see the hidden garb and your hidden agendas, and everything being exposed. So the only way that you guys can even survive in this industry is by washing out what the real truth is, by abiding by the laws of your country, the international laws and the local laws. So make sure that you keep a watch on your tongue and make sure that you speak the facts with evidences. We are more than open and willing to hear out from every one of you media houses out there. You need any clarifications? Come to us. Let's see. We have evidences for every single fact that we are speaking, that we are quoting here. Eldaba being one of the most prominent, and I'm very sure that you guys have just purchased it, just like how you purchase other people. You guys have purchased your viewership, and you guys, being one of the so-called technically prominent people out there in Bolivia, which is heavily funded by the colonizers and the colonizing mental setup predators who are there. It is you people who have started this entire allegation. And be very clear, what you have started is an all out war, not on just Kailasa, but on all the indigenous nations, the entire indigenous community, the entire international law itself. By discouraging the various international laws, by delegitimizing, trying to legitimize the indigenous nations who are there, you have gotten into a very wrong grave and that you have dug for yourself. So either come out clean, apologize, or we are not going to back off. You are going to face what you have given us.
And now you are blaming Kailasa to be evil environmental exploiters? Are you serious? And just when we thought that your creative journalism couldn't get any more imaginative, you've really outdone yourself. And bravo on inventing yet another fictional narrative that Kailasa is an environmental exploiter engaged in carbon market and neo-colonizing. So what is next in your fantasy series? Kailasa secretly breeding dragons in the Amazon, building a Death Star in Bolivia? Your accusation that we are exploiting natural resources or gaming carbon markets would be hilarious if it weren't so offensively hypocritical. So let's take a moment in the reality check. See, accusing Kailasa of neocolonization isn't just wrong, it is absurdly, spectacularly ironic. It's like accusing the fire extinguishers of starting the fires. And so Kailasa represents indigenous Hindus who have survived the largest genocide in human history. More than 500 million Hindus killed, more than 4 million Hindus enslaved, more than 160 million Hindus were starved to death through orchestrated famines. And we've had our temples razed, our educational institutions destroyed, and our ancient texts, more than 80 million of them, burnt by the colonizers and the invaders. And we are literally a nation formed by victims of colonization. So when you can accuse us, an indigenous people who has suffered centuries of colonial exploitation, of being colonizers ourselves, you are not just wrong. You are exhibiting a level of historical blindness so profound that it deserves its own medical classification.
And your neo-colonial savior complex, projecting much. Let's discuss what's really happening here. Projection on an IMAX scale. Because for centuries, Western powers and media have appointed themselves the guardians of what indigenous people can or cannot do. Your paternalistic assumption that indigenous communities need your protection from check notes other indigenous communities reveals more about your colonial mindset than about Kailasa's intentions. Bolivia's indigenous communities have agency, intelligence, and constitutional rights to self-determination. When they choose to partner with another indigenous nation, which is us, suddenly this racist, anti-Hindu, Hinduphobic media journalists such as El Mundo or El Deber swoops in like a colonial savior to protect from their own decisions. That's not journalism. Excuse me. That's neocolonialism wearing a press badge.
Similarly, just like what we are looking at, you guys are not environmental stewardship. You guys are not protecting the environment in any way. On the contrary, we are actually doing it. While you have been very busy crafting the environmental villain narratives, here's what Kailasa actually stands for. Our 16,500-year-old tradition declares, "My mother is earth and I am her son." Prithvi Sukta in Atharva Veda. It very clearly declares environmental policy, environmental stewardship is not just our policy, it is literally written into our very DNA. And this is described in our oldest sacred texts, which you don't even know. Our agreements with these indigenous communities are explicitly towards this. And we have implemented zero carbon initiatives across all our humanitarian missions in over 196 countries. Kailasa has its presence in all of them. Our clean water, sustainable farming, renewable energy plans, and programs have benefited millions on ground. Meanwhile, the corporate interests that you conveniently ignore continue their actual resource extraction across indigenous territories. Why don't you just look at how conveniently all you anti indigenous media houses have conveniently hidden the entire illegal mining, illegal deforestation, and resource exploitation that has been going on in the last, let's take even the last few years, 3 years. It's not that it's a thing of past, it has been going on every single day. The these things, these corporate interests that you very conveniently ignore. Why? Because naturally, that's your bread and butter. The problem is attacking them does not generate the same clicks as attacking us. So naturally, what do? Attack us because you can feed, you can be a predator on the indigenous and vulnerable communities out there.
And let's look at your colonial double standards. You're saying that the rules are for thee, but not for me. Your selective outrage exposes a pattern of double standards that would be comical if it weren't so harmful. When the Western NGOs partner with indigenous communities, humanitarian cooperation, they say, when Kailasa does exactly the same, it is called neocolonization. When Western companies establish carbon offset projects, it is called green innovation. When Kailasa supports sustainable indigenous practices, you call it carbon market exploitation. When Western nations maintain diplomatic relations, you call it international cooperation. And when Kailasa forms diplomatic relations partnership, you call it infiltration. These double standards aren't subtle. They are as obvious as a neo sign in a nature preserve. They reveal that your concern isn't really about environmental protection or indigenous rights as you claim it to be. It's about maintaining the colonial power dynamic where Western entities retain the exclusive right to engage with indigenous communities.
Absolutely, Ma. Actually, the way how our approaches, which is the anti-colonization playbook. See, Kailasa's engagement with indigenous communities represent the exact opposite of what the colonizers are doing. First, we recognize and amplify indigenous sovereignty. Unlike the historical colonizers who denied the indigenous self-determination, we explicitly acknowledge and supported our agreements include language that reinforces indigenous autonomy and require government ratification.
And same way, the another point that we are looking at is Kailasa prioritizes indigenous knowledge preservation. This is unlike the colonizers who suppressed and oppressed the indigenous wisdom. We work day and night to document, to preserve, and to revitalize the traditional knowledge systems, recognizing their value for sustainable living. This is exactly what we do, and this falls apart from the colonizers throughout the history.
And we support development on indigenous terms, unlike these colonizers who impose external development models. We follow indigenous leadership in determining what sustainable development means for their communities.
Absolutely, and we advocate for the indigenous representation, unlike the colonizers who are so busy, who only silence the indigenous voices. We work to ensure indigenous perspectives are heard in international forums. UAN, United Ancient Nations, is exactly that. And this is what is threatening the people, threatening the colonizers.
And
And
if you look at the facts, we are the people, we are the victims of colonization because we have undergone centuries of trauma, centuries of exploitation. So we understand what it is to go through this persecution and precisely the reason why what we are doing, why our approach is built on mutual respect, on cultural exchange, and genuine partnership. It is the very antithesis of the colonial exploitation that your article falsely attributes to us.
so the bottom line is project less and research more. See, El Mundo and also El Debers, because you really started this. Your environmental exploitation narrative is just another chapter in your ongoing fiction series about Kailasa. It is time to put down the creative writing pen and pick up some actual journalistic tools like fact checking, for example, source verification, and basic research.
And I also want to reiterate, Kailasa will continue our work. We will continue supporting the indigenous communities. We will not back off. We have faced too many attacks like this. We will not back off. We will continue supporting, we will continue our work which supports the indigenous communities, continues to support the environmental protection, regardless of all your fabricated narratives. Our partnerships based on mutual respect and shared indigenous values will thrive long after your sensationalist headlines are forgotten.
And you all need to understand whether you're Elderber, whether you're the other media, anti-indigenous media, El Mundo, Avasak, Bruhula, Infobe, Opinion, all you guys be very clear. Just like you guys, there were historically other anti-indigenous, Hinduphobic, Hinduistic media who tried to play the same cards as you guys, but they lost. More than 40 media outlets from across 14 different countries have already removed the similar defamatory content and they have issued apologies after recognizing their errors. At least they were clear that they cannot play this hand on us. If not, the international watchdogs, the international community is not going to keep quiet. And they chose integrity. What about you? What are you going to choose?
And the world is watching. Let me just read out all the names again because really the world should know who all are you guys. El Mundo, Awasqua, Opinion, Infobe, Brujula, El Deber, Ana Bolivia, Vision 360, Ahora El Pueblo, Tinformas, El Periodico. The world is watching. If you are genuinely concerned about environmental exploitation, perhaps direct your investigative resources towards the actual multinational corporations extracting resources from indigenous territories. But that would require actual journalism rather than recycling colonial troops against an indigenous Hindu nation, wouldn't it?
And I just want to make it clear, truth does not require your validation. Environmental stewardship does not need your approval. Who are you to approve it? And indigenous partnerships don't become neo-colonization because you have misinterpreted them. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. You're just a media house, and that too, a Hindu-phobic media house. And you need to do your fact checking again. If at all you have any kind of credibility left, sorry, it's in the tip. And you need to save yourself right away because the international communities, the global thinkers are watching us right now. We are having so many messages of support that are flowing in from all directions. So this is a warning, Eldebers. El Mundo, and all other these fake media channels, the so-called media channels, whether it's Infobay or Brujula or Opinion or El Deber, Ana Bolivia, Vision 360, or Tinformas, El Periodico, ABC, to all of you, this is a warning.
And I think there are a couple of other names as well who need to be given the honor of trying to do the same plague that the bigger guys have been doing. So let me add on to a couple of more anti-indigenous media names that have been propagating false narratives and agendas. Few more names are RTP Bolivia, Brujula Digital, Tan Medios, Vision 360, Ana Bolivia, Sumendo versus Prensa Inoticiasbo, and Elsig Gloweb, Ellis Gloweb. And we have a couple of more, Infodis and El Periodico, Eju TV, and Inoticias, Lu 17, Diary Panorama, Airball, Americiteve, and FS Servicios, Swiss Info, Noticias Protagonistas, El Payas, ABC, Publica Prensa Latina, Opinion, and of course the godfather of all, El Dabar and Argent. So I think these are some of the noteworthy names who have been trying to perpetrate and bringing in this false narratives. We also have a couple of more YouTube comments that have been coming, actually a lot which are there. And Ramanujam Desikan is telling so much of clarity about the colonizers' exploitation. Thanks a lot for providing such a profound truth, and it makes a lot of sense now. Yes, Ramanujamaya, what you're telling is exactly right. In fact, what we are looking at is how very clear, very systematically these colonizers actually cover the entire persecution, the entire narrative, the way that they want it, the way that is beneficial for them, and they present it. They literally, quite literally, are predators preying on the indigenous. That's exactly what we are looking at. And if we slip, just like just a slip of an eye, the prey is caught by the predator. That exactly is what's happening. But here, Swamiji is standing as a loud and clear call to all the indigenous, not just waking up the Hindus, but the entire indigenous nations, communities, kingdoms, people, the First Nations, ancient nations, every single one, giving out a clarion call to what rightfully belongs to us, to what rightfully belongs to them as indigenous traditions and as indigenous communities. We do not need to be dictated terms by any of these guys. We are intelligent enough and we have been intelligent enough. And it is our right for us to decide what we need to do. We have the strength to do it, whether it is politically, whether it is legally, whether it is through the social power, the media power that we are looking at now. Kailasa is not going to back off, and we are all going to stand tall. So, Ramanujamaya, please go ahead, share this information with as many people as possible, and let all the indigenous nations from everywhere, all over the world, join together. Let's all come together, stand strong to visualize and to make this real vision of the United Nations, United Ancient Nations as a reality, and bring legitimacy to each and every one of our indigenous traditions out there.
And I just wanted to add in over here because this is something that all of us need to understand. Colonizers have no right to dictate us. They are nobody to tell us what to do. Who are they? Come on, just take an example. Before the colonization happened in Bharat, do you know we were having 40% of the global GDP. But what happened when they left? We crashed down to less than 0.3%. We were literally starved. Like everything was taken away from us. And we just collapsed. Until now, we have not even been able to get up from that. This is what will happen if colonizers try come and dictate their terms. It's time now for us to wake up so that we don't let that history repeat itself.
And do you know, because of these colonizers, invaders, we have literally lost our homelands. We are indigenous to Afghanistan, we are indigenous to Pakistan, even to Malaysia, to Bangladesh. But what is happening now? Hindus are persecuted, and not only that, there are anti-Hindu discriminative laws in these countries. And so I really wanted to address this neo-colonial threat that these media are accusing us of, because we are the one who has actually suffered more than anyone else. We've lost millions of square kilometers of sovereign lands. And today, Hindus are just less than 2% in any country, in most of the countries, just less than 2%, because we've been driven out en masse. And so neo-colonial, I mean, that's not just a knee slapper. It's the comedic masterpiece of the century, actually, deserving its own Netflix special. And allow me to introduce ourselves properly. We are indigenous Hindus, as we've been mentioning, whose history is not written in textbook, but it's etched in the graveyard of colonial scars. Our ancestral narrative includes, once again, it's very important to note down, to remember these numbers, because nobody is going to teach you. You will not find these in history books. Schools will not teach you. There's been more than 500 million Hindus that have been massacred, more than 4 million Hindus enslaved, more than 160 million Hindus starved to death by famine, and that too not just by natural famines, by engineered famines. And thousands of temples were razed to dust, and 80 million sacred texts, Hindu texts, were burned to ashes.
We did not learn about this colonization from our university lectures. We learned it from our collective trauma that have been passed down through generations of survivors. Our people had once inhabited 56 indigenous nations, indigenous Hindu kingdoms that spanned over 6 million square kilometers across Asia, with over 10,000 traditions and 1,700 provinces. Today, we are scattered. All our sovereign lands are unlawfully annexed. Our communities are forced into mass exodus. This is not from textbooks. This is from what has been passed down through generations of trauma.
And yet, with this breathtaking audacity, you have cast us as the colonial villains in your narrative? How dare you? Ask the Kashmiri Hindus about colonization, where 300,000 to 800,000 were violently expelled from their ancient homeland in just a single year, 1989 to 1990. 300,000 to 800,000 of them were forced into exodus, leaving just 3,000 remaining in the valley, a homeland they inhabited since 13400 BCE, now emptied through systematic ethnic cleansing. That is colonization. That's what we know intimately because we are the victims of it for generations now.
And we are not here to colonize. We are here to collaborate with fellow indigenous communities who recognize in us the same struggle for cultural survival and self-determination. We are building bridges between persecuted peoples who understand what it means to have your very existence threatened.
Adding in a little bit of humor here, the way you guys are accusing Kailasa to exploiting green funds, it is such a stretch that not just it deserves a gold medal, but we can have an entire Olympic podium for this. It requires an Olympic level mental gymnastic to transform a partnership between two indigenous communities that is focused on conservation into some nefarious carbon market scheme that you fellows are telling. Speak about facts, not stories.
Seriously, let's actually talk about our Kailasa's main environmental work. Swamiji, the supreme pontiff of Hinduism, has revived ancient agriculture techniques that predate the modern sustainable practices by thousands of years. Kailasa has participated in planting of millions of trees worldwide. We have established water conservation system based on the ancient Hindu science that predate modern hydrology. And our communities practice vegetarianism at a rate far exceeding the global averages, dramatically reducing our carbon. And what are you talking about here?
And our mission is the preservation of indigenous knowledge systems, ancestral territories, and cultural practices, not financial exploitation. These conservation partnerships were established long before carbon markets because became fashionable, and we will continue long after the next environmental funding trend emerges.
And if you're really genuinely concerned, I have actually a real question. If you guys are really concerned about neocolonialism in Bolivia, perhaps you need to redirect your investigative zeal towards the multinational mining corporations that are day and night illegally extracting lithium, silver, zinc, and tin from all these vulnerable indigenous territories. Why don't you go and look at there? Why do you want to say that I keep my eyes closed so there's no mining happening in that direction? That's what we are looking at here.
But
Examine
no,
the petroleum companies that are drilling on the ancestral lands, scrutinize the agribusinesses, the conglomerates that are there, that are converting the rainforest into cattle ranches. Do all of these, but you won't.
see, they won't, because these actual extractive industries somehow escape their righteous indignation. Instead, see, all of you, El Mundo, El Deber, and so on, your journalistic spotlight finds its way to vilify indigenous Hindu communities working with other indigenous peoples on conservation. And funny how it works, isn't it? When actual colonizers extract resources, you call it investment. But when indigenous communities collaborate, it's suddenly neocolonialism. And the selective outrage is just so transparent. It's practically invisible. So if we wanted to exploit carbon markets, we wouldn't have included clauses requiring governmental approval in our agreements. We wouldn't have explicitly structured our partnerships around cultural exchange and traditional knowledge preservation. We certainly wouldn't have engaged with communities in a manner consistent with both the Bolivian law and international conventions on indigenous rights.
I think this kind of makes it very clear. Two things are very evident from what we have been speaking, I think, the last almost 3 hours now. Two things are very, very evident. The number one thing that we need to understand, especially for all the viewers who are watching us live, point number one is how the anti indigenous media has been actively working over time, suppressing the rights of the indigenous nations and the indigenous people in the ground in Bolivia. It's very evident. Till date, there have been articles that have been published by some people, once again, for their own personal benefits. But now that Kailasa is here, knowing that Kailasa stands for the rights of the indigenous people, they are not able to put up with the power that Kailasa exudes. It's not that Kailasa exudes any hard power. It's not that we have held any person, any of these media houses at gunpoint. No, we have not. All that we have done is just empowering the indigenous people. What is exactly their truth? What is exactly their fact? What exactly they need to embrace? So that is number one. where the anti-indigenous sentiment, the anti-indigenous narratives that is continuously being circulated, perpetrated, and forced upon the Bolivian and the international audience. That's number one. Number two, it's very clear that Kailasa has done nothing illegal. Every single thing that Kailasa has done has been in complete accordance with the international and the local law. Whether it is Kailasa's international personality, legal personality internationally, or it is the partnership agreements that Kailasa has entered into with the indigenous communities, both are in complete compliance and adhere to both the international and the local law as well. So these two things are very evident from what we have been discussing now.
Actually, most ironic thing that is getting exposed is that in this entire fabrication, in attempting to paint Kailasa to be as something neo-colonial, you have employed the most colonial tactic of all, dehumanizing indigenous people by denying our history, distorting our intentions, and dismissing our right to collaborate and self-determination. This is what you have been doing as colonizers for centuries now. And the same playbook is being replayed right now. And this is the irony that we are witnessing as we are talking right now. Every single media house, El Deberes, El Mundo, Vision 360, Ana Bolivia, and Tinformas, ABC, Noticias, everyone who are carrying the same narrative, replaying the same colonial playbook again and again.
And so please, all of you anti-Hindu racist media should really please stop spinning your colonial fantasy and understand that when you cast indigenous survivors of genocide as colonial threats, you're not just wrong, you are inverting reality itself. You are engaging in the same erasure and demonization tactics that have been used against indigenous peoples worldwide for centuries.
Actually, now we are telling this. Why are they spreading this? We saw clearly. We understand their colonial mental setup. But what's happening on ground is what is heartbreaking for me. Like, I'm still not able to get over seeing how our moms, brother moms are being treated. It's so painful. Whom we have always seen being so blissful and serving people. Now we are only hearing their shrieks. We are hearing them yelling, saying how they are being beaten up, how they are being like so manhandled in such horrific ways. We are getting such disturbing visuals. That is what we get to see right now. That is what we are seeing again and again. And this is what needs to really, really stop. You can see here, this is one of the very disturbing visual we got. How our monks, our Kailasians that are living there are being manhandled, beaten up.
And you will see in this video that, just maybe for the new viewers who are here, our sister nuns and brother monks were wrongfully, illegally detained. Their passports were snatched. Their devices were snatched. And they were not even allowed representation. Even our own lawyers couldn't reach them. It was a bunch of men just barged into the private Adinam of Kailasa. And some of them were even kids and pregnant women. They were denied food and water. And these mob, racist anti-indigenous mob, did not even allow the local indigenous community to help them. They were coming forward They were coming forward with water. One of our sannyasi even fell unconscious because they could not drink water. They were not allowed any water, even though the indigenous people wanted to help. And even these indigenous people were held at gunpoint. They were threatened. So do you see at what level these anti-Hindu mob, anti-indigenous mob can go to stop indigenous nations from reclaiming their right to self-determination?
And whatever we are looking at, especially.
Hey, don't tell us. So these people hold the gas come in our house and yes, with gun and push our faces. No, everything stops in our home. Political immigration, this is political immigration. This is political immigration. They come our home, and they hold the gas come in our room. There's no human rights in Bolivia. There's no human rights in Bolivia. Bolivia immigration, violating the human rights.
Yes, so you can actually see in this video how these girls, women were handled, how they were manhandled. And these are sannyasis. They've taken vows of sannyasis. They are not supposed to be held by men, but they had complete disregard of the indigenous culture, traditions, indigenous vows. And many of these, our nuns, I mean, it really pains me to talk about it because I can't imagine what they've been going through. They've been physically hurt. As we can see in this video, and there are many other videos that are, and see, we are not getting any of this information. We are getting this information when these media are publishing about it, because we don't know.
And yes, with gun and push our faces. No, everything stops in our home. Political immigration, this is political immigration. This is political immigration. They come our home, and they hold the gas come in our room. There's no human rights in Bolivia. There's no human rights in Bolivia. Bolivia immigration, violate the human rights. Hey, don't tell us. So these people hold the gas come in our house and yes, with gun and push our faces. No, everything stops in our home. Political immigration, this is political immigration. This is political immigration. They come our home, and they hold the
So as you can see here, how these women, these nuns, how they were struggling, and how this mob, anti-Hindu, anti-indigenous, racist mob, just barged in and harming our nuns, innocent nuns, who only went there to serve the local people. That was their only goal. What is the need to treat them like this? It is so painful to see how they are being treated, what they have to go through. They've left behind their lives and taken sannyas for the sake of serving humanity, for reviving our indigenous cultures and traditions that the world only is going to be benefiting, not just the indigenous nations. They've literally sacrificed their lives, and this is how they are treated. It is absolutely unacceptable and painful that even our pregnant women has to go through this.
The consistent attacks that we have been going through, whether it is in Bolivia or the parallel attacks that we have been facing in Kailasa, Rajapalayam, and in Setur in Bharat, all of these are a grand scheme of attacks that are happening at a larger narrative. Each of these are not individualized, one-pointed attacks which are there, but rather a part of a very large scheme that is going on. And that is what we all need to understand. Otherwise, the human rights violation that is there is just way too high. And for what? What have we done? We have not done anybody. We have not done anything to anybody. Have we gone and attacked somebody? No. Have we gone and snatched properties of somebody? No. Have we tried doing anything illegal? No. Then why so much of attack? It is very evident for all of us to look at this and for all of us to internalize, especially all the Hindus and the indigenous people out there, all the indigenous brothers and sisters of Bolivia. It is time that we look at it for ourselves to understand what exactly is going on with us. And there is a whole sector of people who want to keep us as slaves, continue to keep us under the control of these indigenous, anti indigenous media, the anti indigenous groups, so that they can continue to predate and exploit our resources because we become scapegoats for all the power hunger that they have. So it's time for every one of us to wake up from the attacks that we have been consistently going through and stand up for our rights, fight for our rights.
And it is equally very important that all of us here, all the viewers, share this persecution very actively. Again, reach out to all the local government officials, and even reach out to all these media channels and holding them accountable. Reach out and tell the world what persecution indigenous communities have been going on since centuries. Reach out and tell the world how Hindus also are indigenous people. Because let me tell you, there are narratives out there that claims that Hindus are not indigenous. Anti-Hindu racist people, elements, deep state elements are working very, very actively trying to delegitimize Hindus, Hinduism, its culture, its history. And there are a lot of narratives out there, and you will actually see so much of hate comments, so much of hate articles about Hinduism also, outright straight, abusive and lie. But they don't care about this. They will actually keep on telling the same lies, because when they keep on telling the same lies and we are not refuting them, that becomes the truth for the mass.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm seeing many of the comments, very lot of comments coming in. Ma Durjati has posted saying, seeing the picture that we just showed shows clearly, looks like someone grabbed and scratched their very arm and very hard. And those are all nail scratches. And she's also able to recognize the voice of those Adinavasis who are screaming there. Absolutely. I know it's so painful, especially when we are seeing, as we know these people, right? They're our own sister monks. And suddenly we only have seen them being so happy, serving others and doing Swamiji's. And all of a sudden we see them here literally screaming for their lives. It's too painful. Ramanujam Desikan in YouTube has posted video shows how women sannyasis or monks are mishandled and their voices show they're in danger and need immediate support from right authorities there. Clearly hearing voice, no human rights in Bolivia. That is exactly what's happening right now. And this is being propagated. This is being driven from by certain deep state elements that are trying their level best to somehow eliminate us, eliminate the indigenous people, eliminate all of us, just so that we do not empower the indigenous people. They just want to eliminate Kailasa. They want to eliminate the United Ancient Nations from happening. But jokes on them, because UAN has already been established. And now, if we as Hindus stand together with solidarity, we can win. And we will win because Paramashiva is here with us. Swamiji, Paramashiva himself is here with us. The question is all about how many of you as Hindus are ready to wake up from the criminal negligence. It is not just you doing shares or taking this, spreading the truth, but about how many of you are ready to go and tell every single one of your friends, tell your family members, tell everyone that you know this is what is happening. You have the power to stop this persecution right now. It is all about a decision from you.
And the attacks that we are all looking at is what we have been historically facing. If we do not stand up, voice our rights out now, then the next generation will not have anything to call as Hinduism for themselves. It is because of the sacrifice of our ancestors, of all the Naga sadhus, the sannyasis who are there. Today, the whatever we know as Hinduism is there. And each and every one of us are having Hinduism today and enjoying it because of the sacrifices of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. Otherwise, do you think you and me would be Hindus today? No. The answer would be absolute no. Even if I look back at my own life, I would not have been a Hindu. And it is so deeply ingrained that it is Hinduism the reason for all our failures. Now, it is time that all of us sacrifice and leave our lower identities, stand strong with the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, who has sacrificed his entire life just for this awakening of the mass, just for this awakening of each and every one of us. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we stand strong, we are bold, and we take the truth to the entire world. And despite any attacks, despite any persecution, coming together and standing strong for this one purpose. So, once again, be strong, share this with as many people as possible, and we will be exposing more and more of these lies and how the narratives are set so that the Hindus and the indigenous can continue to be brainwashed and kept under control as pawns under the control of the kings.
Absolutely. And this must be put to an end. We need to stop this. Actually, I also wanted to bring in one more factor over here about how, see, as Hindus, we are not waking up to the fact that we don't have a platform to voice out. How ironic is this situation? See, just see. We have all the evidences, we have proofs. Everything that we are talking are with clear proofs. But our voices, these evidences are not published anywhere. No one is ready to hear it. No one is bothering to publish any of these. Oh, Hindus, it's a wake-up call for us. We need to decide to wake up to this, share this. We have to amplify our voice.
And for all the Bolivian media, all the media houses who are there, if you are really genuinely interested in giving the right information to the people, which is what is supposed to be your ethics, the journalistic ethics, then make sure that you get the information straight, that you set the record straight, that you hear out from our side what is the happenings, what are the facts from our side, what is our history, and give all the information together for the mass who is there. All the people of the Bolivian press, let's take a moment to appreciate the extraordinary spectacle that we have witnessed. Quite literally, a beautiful and a well efforted, coordinated media campaign that is labeling the indigenous Hindu survivors of the various genocide and persecution as fake and fictitious, and worse, calling us criminals. If the irony is not sufficient, then I don't know what else is.
And what we've seen unfold across your publications isn't journalism. It's a masterclass in colonial thinking masquerading as news. And you've really managed to recycle century-old stereotypes about mysterious Eastern cults and packaging them in modern terminology. And while positioning yourself as defenders of indigenous rights, the cognitive dissonance is so profound, it deserves its own field of study. And see, let's also be very clear about what's happening here. Kailasa represents the first sovereign homeland for the persecuted indigenous Hindus in modern history. Our very existence challenges the colonial narrative that indigenous peoples should remain forever displaced, forever seeking recognition from their colonizers. And our crime, it seems, is refusing to play the role assigned to us, that of perpetual victims awaiting salvation from Western institutions.
Actually, instead of following this path, we as Kailasa have had the audacity to establish diplomatic relations with sovereign entities worldwide. We have formed partnerships with fellow indigenous communities based on mutual respect. And we as Kailasa preserve the ancient knowledge systems which has been threatened with extinction. Challenge the notion that statehood is a privilege granted by the colonial powers rather than an inherent right of self-determination. This has been possible because of the relentless hard work, untiring hard work of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and his immense sacrifice. And this is what Kailasa has lived and demonstrated and established. We are not here to fall prey or victims of the colonial mindset or what the colonialists dictate as to be how we indigenous nations need to function. No, we have our sovereignty. We have the right to exercise our fundamental rights.
And see, for this, we find ourselves subjected to a barrage of recycled falsehoods, deliberately decontextualizing the agreements and disproving the allegations, all presented without the basic journalistic courtesy of seeking comment from the subjects of your reporting. And
in fact, one thing that I wanted to add on, sorry, just one thing I wanted to add to what you're telling. What's really intriguing about how these journalists and these anti-indigenous mafia is using the selective application of skepticism. See, the agreements that Kailasa has entered into these indigenous communities explicitly include government ratification clauses, a fact that is conspicuously absent from the reporting of all of these media houses. They don't do that. Our agreements are fully in compliance with the Bolivian law, with the international conventions, and the constitutional rights of the indigenous people. But yet, when you look at how these guys are projecting it, how the anti-Hindu media is projecting, how the Hindu-phobic media is projecting, how the anti-indigenous media is projecting, they are shown as if they are nefarious plots and a very clear targeted attack trying to extract exploit the indigenous communities which are there. While on the contrary, you see the extractive industries, they happily run a riot on the indigenous territories and continue with their operations with little to no scrutiny at all. This is the fact that we are looking at. This is the reality that we are looking at today.
Exactly. When multinational corporations, when they lease land from the indigenous communities, they call it as development, where we very clearly see how the exploitation of nature happens. And they call it as what? Development. But when Kailasa does it, and that also with explicit environmental conservation goals, we have not bought any land. We are only partnering with them with clear conservation goal, environmental conservation goals, and to protect Amazon and cultural conservation, cultural preservation clauses. Suddenly, they come up from nowhere claiming neo-colonialism. The double standard isn't just evident, it's the entire foundation of your narrative.
And I also feel one of the most troubling aspects of what they have been doing, what the anti-indigenous media has been continuously and in fact very casually repeating, is the allegations that have been decisively refuted in the courts of law, where they keep calling the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism as fugitive, as self-styled, as rape accused. Come on, all of this has been refuted very clearly. 4 separate US federal and state courts have not only exonerated the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, but they have imposed substantial penalties on these false accusers, over $7 million US, all put together. But all these judicial findings have just come very conveniently omitted from the reporting of any of these media houses, and rather twisted, they're replaced with the sensationalist accusations just to dehumanize and delegitimize the entire indigenous community and people out there.
And this isn't just sloppy journalism, it's a direct violation of Bolivian law. Your constitution explicitly protects religious freedom and indigenous cultural expressions, and specifically law number 45 prohibits discrimination based on religion and cultural identity. So by publishing demonstrably false claims designed to incite prejudice against a religious minority, these media outlets have crossed the line from biased reporting into potentially criminal conduct.
The pattern here is very, very clear. You can just see it through. When indigenous people assert our rights in ways that challenge this colonial power structure, then immediately we face demonization. Now, this is the pattern that time and again that the colonialists have proven. Kailasa's crime is not violating any law. It is our submit to that narrative that indigenous people must forever seek permission from the colonialists to exist. Because we are not submitting ourselves to that. we are being targeted and attacked.
And let us offer a novel suggestion here to the Bolivian media. Perhaps let the indigenous people know, let them decide what is best for indigenous people, because they know what is best for indigenous peoples. These racist anti-indigenous media, they don't know. They have colonial mindset. And perhaps agreements between indigenous communities don't require their colonial interpretation to be legitimate. Perhaps, and this may be truly revolutionary, that you could actually contact the subject of your reporting before publishing demonstrably false allegations about them. And here the Hindu civilization has survived countless attempts at erasure for millennia. We've endured genocides that claimed hundreds of millions of lives. We've watched our sacred texts burned, our temples destroyed. It is still ongoing. In all the countries, you will see still Hindu temples are getting destroyed. There's no respect for Hindu temples. And our people have been dispersed across continents. We've basically become homeless. Hindus are displaced, homeless, indigenous people, because we've lost all our lands. And yet here we stand, not merely surviving, but reviving our ancient traditions, establishing a sovereign homeland for our persecuted communities.
Also, Masi, when we look at all of this that is going on, what we are looking at, for all its sound and fury, the kind of hangama that they are doing, this is just the latest chapter in a story of persecution that we all know too well. It is very well documented in the entire history. Persecution for the last over 700 plus years has been documented so well. What we are looking at here is nothing new to us Hindus. This is not going to deter us from our mission of the revival of the indigenous traditions and preserving our ancient culture. We will stand for these rights. We will support everyone on these rights. It is not going to stop us from forming partnership with other fellow indigenous people, with other indigenous communities. No, it will not. Based on mutual respect and shared goals, we will continue to establish partnerships. We will continue to enter into cooperation agreements to support. And one thing that I want all you anti-indigenous media and all anti-Hindu, Hindu-phobic, Hindu-mistic media to understand, you will not be able to silence our voices as we assert our fundamental rights to exist. And you cannot do anything about it.
And to all those media channels out there who value truth above sensation, here we would like to extend an invitation. You can contact us. We have actually clearly stated the facts throughout this live video. And we are ready. You can speak with our representatives, visit our communities, go witness firsthand the humanitarian services, the environmental work that we are doing as Kailasa, what the humanitarian services the Supreme Point of Hinduism is doing worldwide. True journalism seeks understanding, not merely confirmation of pre-existing biases. Understand, the Supreme Court of Bolivia has recognized that the right to information consists of the power that every person has to seek, receive, and impart information, and the correlative obligation of those who generate information to produce it with responsibility and ethical clarity. All we are asking for you, just live up to this. This is enshrined in your own constitution. So any one of you, all those media outlets there, if you value truth over your sensations and you trying to get more TRP for your channel, if you're interested in true journalism and stop being prostitutes, then here you can come and get the right information. We are ready to provide. We have already provided. We are ready to provide. Or you are going to face serious legal consequences.
And I think as we are coming towards the conclusion of today's live, and where we are exposing the truths, as we are coming towards the closure of this response, I think I want to remind all the major media sources once again that more than 40 major international media houses from over 14 countries, including major organizations, well-known names such as the Washington Post, have already recognized their error in publishing similar disinformation, and they have removed all such defamatory articles and content about Kailasa. And they have issued apologies in recognizing their error. This only shows what they truly are, where they are ready to see where they are missing and correct their errors. They chose journalistic integrity over perpetuating falsehood. What are you guys going to choose? Are you guys going to continue on your sensational journeys for TRP or present the facts as a credible media source? The choice is yours. Your reputation, as was mentioned time and again, is hanging by a thread because the world is watching and the world is not fools. Everyone knows. Just like how the truth does not bend. Just because you close your eyes, the sun does not rise in west. Same way, we are not going to back off just because you continue to attack. The real true measure of journalism, when we look at it, is not really how effectively it can tear down those who challenge the status quo, but in fact, true journalism is where it can courageously acknowledge where and when it has been misled. All your readers, all the people who are reading all your articles, deserve nothing less than your commitment to your people, you holding up your journalistic integrity. We have stood for over 10,000 years. Kailasa has stood for over 10,000 years. And we will continue to stand long after today's headlines are forgotten. You will be forgotten. The news will be forgotten. The question is whether your publications are going to be remembered for perpetuating colonial narratives or for having the integrity to correct them. The choice is yours, the say is yours. Just understand one thing, that the entire world is watching, and the history shows that it does not forgive the people who feed disinformation. It does not forgive the predators. So remember that truth does not bend, neither we do. We thank each and every one of the viewers, every one of the well-wishers of Kailasa, all the Raj Sabha members, the Chit Sabha members, the citizens of Kailasa, every single one of you for joining in, tuning in live for today's session, for today's segment, where we expose the grand narratives, the true real narratives of these anti-indigenous media who have been perpetrating false negative informations and ideologies against the indigenous communities and Kailasa. We hope that every one of you have a better understanding of what is going on the ground now. We will be sharing further details and further facts. So I request every one of you to stay tuned. And once again, I'd like to offer our sincere gratitude to Bhagwan, to the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagwan Sri Nityananda Paramashivam, for giving each and every one of us this opportunity to voice out and to really stand for what we truly are, giving us a real sense of identity for who we really are. So we'd like to offer our gratitude to Swamiji, and we'll now conclude this segment with the Purna Mantra. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sarvam Bhagavat Shri Nityananda Paramashiva Padukarpanamastu Om Nityanandam. Thank you, everybody. Nityanandam.